Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are from, also what time is it. You ever feel like something's watching you, even when you're alone? Like a shadow in your periphery, a breath on your neck, a whisper too faint to understand. That feeling isn't just fear. It's something ancient, waiting to be remembered. It all started with a letter. No stamp, no return address, just a yellowing envelope tucked under my apartment door. Inside, a single page written in thin, trembling handwriting. They're not gone. You have to come back. You know what we left behind. The ink had bled through in places, smudged like it had been clutched in a sweaty hand for hours. I knew who wrote it even before I flipped the page to see the signature. Charlie. My cousin, my blood, my past. The name hit me like a fist. I hadn't thought about Charlie in over 15 years, not since the summer we swore never to speak of what happened in Braxton Hollow. We were just kids, barely 13, and what we saw that August never made it into the light of day. It wasn't supposed to. That place, it swallows things whole. I stared at the paper for what felt like hours. The words kept echoing louder in my head the longer I tried to ignore them. They're not gone. Come back. I should have thrown the letter in the trash, poured whiskey over it, set it on fire. Instead, I packed a bag that same night. And before the sun came up, I was driving back to Braxton Hollow. A Braxton Hollow is the kind of town you forget exists until you need to get lost or bury something you hope never crawls out. It's tucked between two ridges in the West Virginia backwoods, unreachable by GPS. You have to remember where the old fire tower used to be. Take the unpaved road past the collapsed barn with the red roof, then drive another 4 miles into forest so dense it drinks the light. The air changed as soon as I crossed into the hollow, heavier, wetter, like it was clinging to me. The trees leaned in closer here. Taller than I remembered, their branches whispering secrets in the wind that weren't meant for me. Or maybe they were. I pulled up to the house just past midnight. Charlie's family place. 2 stories of rotting wood, crooked shutters, and the kind of porch that creaks even when no one's on it. The porch light flickered once, then died. I wasn't surprised. Nothing good survives long in the hollow. The front door was open. I stepped inside, calling his name. Silence. The house smelled of old pine and damp earth. Everything was dust covered, except the table in the living room. That had 2 mugs, still warm, and a journal open to a page dated 3 days ago. Charlie's handwriting was rushed, shaky, but unmistakable. The bones are moving again. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, clutching the journal, waiting for something I couldn't name. Every so often I thought I heard the stairs creak upstairs, but when I went to look, nothing. Just dust and echoes, and that feeling that something was always just a step behind me. By morning I had read every word Charlie had written. Page after page about dreams he couldn't wake from. Of bones clicking under the floorboards. Of shapes in the trees that didn't belong. Of the hill. The hill was always the worst part. That summer, 15 years ago, we found something buried in the side of that hill. Something that bled without veins. Something that whispered even though it had no mouth. We didn't mean to dig it up. We were just kids playing at being treasure hunters, armed with a rusted shovel and wild imagination. But the deeper we went, the stranger things became. The soil turned black, thick like tar. The earth groaned. And then the thing in the pit opened its eyes. We never spoke of it again. We covered the hole and ran. A week later, Charlie's brother went missing. A month after that, his mother walked into the woods and never came back. Now he was saying it wasn't dead. I had to find him. I started with the neighbors, what few were left, old Mrs. Kincaid across the road remembered me, though her eyes had clouded over with age and something else. Charlie's been out there every night, she said. nodding toward the woods behind the house. Digging, talking to the trees like they'd talk back. Did they? I asked before I could stop myself. She gave me a long, hollow stare. Oh, they do. They just don't say anything you'd want to hear. I found the trail later that afternoon. Bare footprints, deep and scattered, leading from behind the house into the tree line. I followed. The forest swallowed me whole. Each step felt heavier. The silence louder. Birds didn't sing here. Insects didn't hum. Even the wind seemed scared to breathe. I walked for an hour before I saw it, the hill. Taller now somehow, covered in moss and bones. Real bones, sticking out like the earth had vomited up a graveyard. And there, at the center, a fresh hole. I didn't want to go near it. Every instinct screamed to turn back. But I had come too far. At the edge of the pit, I called his name. No answer. I stepped closer. The hole was deeper than any shovel could dig in one night. At least 10 feet down, perfectly smooth. As if the dirt had been moved aside rather than dug up. Something moved inside. I froze. It wasn't Charlie. It wasn't even human. I saw an arm. Long, thin, the skin stretched and pale. It reached up slowly, fingers twitching like it was trying to remember how to move. Then another arm, then a face. Or what used to be one. Eyes that were just black pits. A mouth torn open far too wide. Stitched at the edges with something that looked like hair. And the worst part, it smiled. Not at me, but through me. I stumbled back, slipped on the muss, fell hard. By the time I looked up, it was gone. The pit was empty. But I could still feel it. Watching, I ran. Branches whipped my face. Roots clawed my ankles. The forest didn't want me to leave. When I finally burst out into the clearing near the house, the sun had started to set and Charlie was there, sitting on the porch like he'd been waiting the whole time. His clothes were torn, his hands filthy, eyes hollow. You shouldn't have come, he said. You asked me to? He didn't answer. I looked at him, really looked, and realized he wasn't breathing. That night I heard scratching in the walls. Slow, purposeful. Like something was drawing letters in the wood just behind the plaster. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even close my eyes. Because every time I did, I saw that smile. That impossible knowing smile. By dawn, the scratching stopped. The house was quiet. Charlie was gone. Again, I went back to the pit. This time there were voices. Whispers from the hole. My name. My name. Over and over. I wanted to leave, to run and never look back. But something pulled at me. A memory. A scream. No, not a scream. Laughter. Mine and Charlie's. From 15 years ago. From that same hill. Before we found it. Before we ruined everything. Then another sound. A baby crying. No, not crying. Calling. Something was waking up. And I was already too late. That night, I dreamt of fire. The house burning. The woods closing in. And Charlie, standing in the flames, his mouth sewn shut with wire, eyes full of tears he couldn't shed. I woke up screaming, gasping for air. My hands were covered in dirt. The bed was gone. I was lying in the pit. When I opened my eyes, the world was nothing but black earth and stale air. The weight of the soil above me was gone, yet the scent of rot and iron clung to my lungs like mold. My fingers twitched against the cold dirt floor, and for a moment I couldn't tell if I was awake or still buried in some nightmare. But as the silence stretched and the shadows moved, not with light, but with intent, I knew I wasn't dreaming. I was inside something. The pit was deeper than I'd thought, much deeper. Where I'd expected raw soil and roots, there were walls now. Smooth, rounded, like a tunnel bored out from the inside. The dirt didn't look dug. It looked melted, like something had passed through it, leaving the space open behind it. And I wasn't alone. There was a sound just ahead of me, not footsteps, not breathing, but a low, wet shift like flesh sliding across stone. It wasn't constant, it came in pulses, like a heartbeat or chewing. I didn't call for Charlie. Something deep inside me, something ancient, told me not to make a sound. I moved slowly, crouching low, following the faint echo of that noise. The tunnel veered left, then dropped suddenly. I slipped, sliding several feet down until I hit a softer patch of earth that didn't feel like dirt at all. It squished beneath me, spongy, damp, warm. I looked down. It was hair. Thousands of strands of black, matted hair, like a carpet grown from the walls. It twisted up around my fingers and ankles, as if it wanted to hold me still. I yanked free and scrambled forward, my hands shaking, breath shallow. Whatever was in here, whatever we'd found 15 years ago, it hadn't just been asleep. It had grown, expanded, adapted. This tunnel wasn't a passage. It was a throat. That's when I saw the carvings. Dozens of them lined the walls, etched into the hardened mud like something had clawed the messages into place. Symbols I couldn't read. Spirals, bone shapes, eyes. Over and over. But some of the messages were written in English. Messy, panicked, daunt, lustan toa tio you can tar ust shesify si, awels in she charleis can. That last one made my stomach turn cold. I thought back to the night before, Charlie, sitting on the porch, hollow-eyed, still. He hadn't breathed, hadn't blinked. And now I was starting to realize maybe he never came back from the pit. Maybe what I saw was wearing his face like a mask. But I turned around to get out, but the tunnel behind me had changed. The way I'd come was gone. In its place was solid wall. No exit. No trace of a path. It had sealed me in. My only choice was forward. As I crawled deeper, the tunnel opened wider, and the temperature dropped. My breath fogged in the air. Ahead, I saw a soft, flickering light. Fire. No, not fire. It glowed too steadily and too blue, like moonlight from nowhere. Then I heard the humming. It was low and broken, like a lullaby sung by a dying voice. At first, I thought it was a recording. Some old cassette warbling in the dark. But the sound wavered too much, trembled with something close to pain. I rounded the corner and found the source. There, hunched in the middle of a wide chamber, was a man. Or what used to be one. His back was to me, his spine protruding like a row of hooks beneath torn skin. He was swaying gently, humming that awful tune, and dragging something long and wet across the floor in circles. His tongue. It had stretched far past human length, blackened and pulsing, as if it had a life of its own. He didn't turn when I stepped closer. He just whispered, "Don't wake her." Her. I opened my mouth to ask, but he whipped around with a speed that stole the words from my throat. His face was split down the middle. One side looked like Charlie. The other was raw, muscle, tendon, eye bulging in a face that didn't belong to any living thing. Too late, he hissed, grinning with teeth like nails. "She's already listening." Then the ground beneath me cracked open. I fell, again, this time into water. Freezing, black water that burned like acid when it hit my skin. I thrashed, gasping, as shapes brushed past me. Not fish, not animals, hands, dozens of them. They reached for me in the dark, some clawing, some stroking gently like they wanted to soothe me before pulling me under. I kicked, fought upward, lungs screaming for air, until something grabbed my ankle. It wasn't a hand. It was a jaw. I felt the teeth clamp down, not to bite, but to hold, to keep me still. Then I was pulled through the water, dragged at impossible speed through pitch blackness, until I was spit out into another chamber. Coughing and retching on the floor, I opened my eyes, and I saw them. Bones. Thousands of them, stacked in spirals that reached the ceiling. Skulls with no jaws, rib cages twisted into knots, all placed with careful precision like offerings, and in the center of it all, a stone table. Charlie lay on it. At least it looked like Charlie. He was pale, lips stitched shut, chest rising and falling in slow, shallow breaths. His eyes were open, wild with panic. He tried to scream, but the stitches held. I rushed to him, tried to pull them loose, but the moment I touched his face, the chamber shook. A voice filled the space, not loud, not angry, but soft, childlike. Mine. I turned. Every bone on the walls rattled in unison. The ground pulsed. And then she appeared. She wasn't walking. She didn't move like anything that belonged in this world. She flowed forward, her limbs bending the wrong way, her skin covered in tiny, writhing mouths. Her face was my face. "You left me," she said, in a perfect imitation of my voice. "You saw me, you heard me. And you left me here to starve." I backed away, dragging Charlie with me. He whimpered behind his stitches. The mouths on her skin opened wider, whispering secrets that made my ears bleed. "Charlie came back," she said. He remembered. Her eyes flicked to him. "But he's not enough. You were both meant to stay. To feed the roots." I didn't understand. Feed. Roots? That's when I saw them. Beneath the bones, threaded through the stone, were black roots, thick, pulsing like veins. They moved, twitched, like they were hungry, and they led back to her. She wasn't just part of the hollow. She was the hollow. It had grown around her, fed from the blood we spilled when we uncovered her. Every scream, every death, nourishment. "You woke me," she said. "And now I'm awake." She lunged. I don't remember how I escaped. There was no door, no path, just light. A searing, impossible light that came from somewhere inside me. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, I was back in the house. Alone, drenched in water and blood. Charlie was gone. Again. But this time, I heard his voice. Not in the room. Not in my head. From beneath the floorboards. Whispering. Begging. "She's not done with us yet, and neither is the hollow." The boards creaked beneath my feet, but it wasn't me making them move. I stood frozen in the living room, staring down at the worn floor as something shifted beneath it. Slow, deliberate, and just beneath the surface. The faint sound of breathing rose up through the cracks, shallow and raspy, like someone gasping with a collapsed lung. Then came the voice. Faint, almost too quiet to catch, but there, clawing up through the slats like it was fighting through dirt. "Help me, Charlie." His voice. But more fragile now, like it had passed through 100 mouths before reaching mine. I dropped to my knees and pressed my ear to the floor. The wood was cold, but there was heat beneath it. Not warm like fire, warm like blood. Thick and wet and pumping. The whisper came again. "She's in the walls." I scrambled back, heart hammering. The room suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. I spun around and stared at the peeling wallpaper, at the water stains that looked too much like faces. I hadn't noticed them before. Or maybe I had and told myself they were nothing. But now they watched. I knew I had to get under the house. The crawl space was accessible through a trapdoor behind the stairs. One I remembered from when we were kids. We used to dare each other to open it. No one ever did. Not even Charlie. The grown-up said rats lived down there. That's how they explained the scratching and the low moans that came at night. But now, I knew better. Rats don't whisper. They don't say your name in voices that belong to people who should be dead. The door groaned when I lifted it, the hinges rusted and wet. A foul gust of air greeted me, thick with mildew and something far worse. Sweet, like rotting fruit left too long in the sun. I clicked on my flashlight and aimed it down the hole. Something moved. It was fast, like a shadow that realized it had been seen. I caught only a glimpse, long limbs, pale skin stretched too thin, and eyes that didn't blink. Gone in an instant. But not gone far. I climbed down. Each step a test of nerve, heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted out. The light from above disappeared as the trapdoor creaked shut behind me, not by my hand. I spun around and aimed the flashlight. Nothing there. Just me and the dark and the sound of breathing. The crawl space stretched far longer than it should have. The house above wasn't more than 50 feet long, but this tunnel beneath it. It went on for what felt like hundreds. The walls were dirt packed tight, with bits of bone poking through like roots. Some were small, some were human. I pressed forward, calling for Charlie. No answer, but the whispers grew louder. Not just his voice now. Others. Familiar. A woman sobbing softly. A child laughing. My mother's voice, dead for years, singing a lullaby I hadn't heard since I was 6. Sleep now, little hollow seed. Close your eyes and never leave. It chilled me more than any scream. I reached a split in the tunnel, 3 ways forward. One to the left, tight and low. One straight ahead, where the dirt looked wet, freshly turned. And one to the right, lit by a dim blue glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. I chose the glow. As I crept down the right tunnel, the air grew colder. The sound of the voices faded, replaced by something worse, a whisper that wasn't made by lips or lungs. It buzzed straight into my mind. Not words, feelings, hunger, loneliness, fury. The tunnel opened into a chamber unlike anything I'd seen. Roots lined the ceiling, black and coiled, dripping with some kind of sap that hissed when it hit the floor. In the center stood a figure. Not Charlie. Not human. It was tall, robed in tattered cloth that looked like stitched skin. Its head was wrapped in what seemed like wet bandages, and from underneath it breathed in deep, trembling sighs. Before I could move, it spoke. Its voice came from every direction at once. "You opened the door." I backed away, but the entrance behind me sealed with a crunch. The dirt moved like it was alive. "You let her wake. You fed her with your fear." "What is she?" I managed, my voice barely audible over the thudding in my ears. "She is the seed beneath your memories. The thing your kind forgot how to bury. You were children, curious. She remembers you." The figure lifted a long, spindly arm and pointed toward a mound in the corner of the chamber. It pulsed gently. "She remembers your blood." I moved closer. Against every instinct, I had to look. The mound was a cocoon, half wrapped in root and bone. And inside, trapped, motionless, eyes wide, was me. Not just a copy, an exact replica. My face, my clothes, even the scar on my chin from falling off a bike when I was 10. "What is this?" I choked. "One of many," the figure said. "Pieces she keeps. In case you run." I stumbled backward. My legs barely held me. This thing, this being had me, or part of me. Maybe it always had. What if I never left the hollow all those years ago? "She split you," the figure said. "The day you uncovered her. You only remember half." I turned toward the voice. "Where's Charlie?" The thing didn't answer. I didn't wait for it to. I turned and threw myself at the wall, clawing at the dirt. It gave way, not easily, but enough. Behind it, a tunnel. A narrow, suffocating crawl space. I squeezed through, the roots above me twitching like angry snakes. For what felt like hours, I crawled. Dirt in my mouth, rocks scraping my knees. Always hearing her, behind me, whispering promises of what she would show me if I just stopped. If I just turned around. If I just gave up. Then I saw it. A sliver of light. I dug faster. My fingers bled. My breath came in sharp, panicked bursts. And finally, I broke through. I spilled out onto a stone floor. This wasn't the house. It was the church. Braxton Hollow's old chapel, abandoned since the 60s. Long before even we were born. My flashlight flickered, dying, then steadied just long enough to show me the pews. Burned. Blackened. The altar cracked down the middle like something had burst out of it. And at the front of the church, nailed to the wall with iron spikes through his wrists, was Charlie. He was alive. Barely. His chest rose and fell, slow and ragged. His eyes fluttered open when he saw me. "She's everywhere," he croaked. "You can't get out." "Who did this?" I whispered. Charlie didn't answer. Something moved behind the altar. I didn't look. I grabbed a fallen candlestick and pried the nails from his wrists. He screamed, but I had no choice. We had to run. When he hit the ground, he tried to stand, but his legs buckled. "She took my feet," he gasped. "Replaced them." I looked. His feet were roots, black, pulsing, still growing. And then the church doors slammed shut. The windows went black, and behind me, the voice returned. Laughing now. Soft, sweet, just like my mother's. The laughter stopped the moment I turned around, and I wished to God it hadn't. Lauder meant it hadn't started feeding yet. Behind the altar, stepping out from the thick shadow like it had peeled itself from the wall, was her. Not the girl we saw in the pit 15 years ago, not exactly. That version had been smaller, more human. This thing had grown in ways bones weren't meant to stretch, in ways skin shouldn't hold. She was tall now, limbs long and dripping with the same black sap I'd seen in the tunnel. Her eyes were gone, replaced by hollow sockets pulsing like lungs. Her mouth hadn't opened yet, but I could feel it trying. The flesh around it twitched and split, like it didn't know where to end. She didn't walk. She hovered. The pews cracked and splintered as she drifted forward, dragging with her a sound that wasn't footsteps or breath, but remembrance. The kind of sound you don't hear with your ears, but feel between your ribs. It came with images, shovels slicing through dark soil, Charlie screaming in the distance, my own hands covered in black muck, reaching for something we should have never touched. I grabbed Charlie under the arms. He groaned, tried to fight me, but he was too weak. The roots that had fused with his legs twitched and pulsed, almost resisting. It was like he was tethered, not just physically, but deeply. He wasn't meant to leave, not anymore. And the worst part, some piece of him knew it. She's part of me now, he breathed through gritted teeth. She took what I left behind. She grew it. Then we're taking it back, I hissed, dragging him across the floor, ignoring the trail of blood and sap he left behind. The church groaned above us. The rafters creaked, and from the corners, tiny shapes scuttled. Bone spiders, small and fast, with too many legs and faces like tiny screaming infants. They watched. They didn't move to stop us. They didn't need to. She was close enough now that the air around her felt thick. Breathing it was like swallowing grief. The kind of grief you don't recover from. The kind you carry like a splinter in your soul. Charlie cried out suddenly. His body jerked in my hands, seizing. I looked down. The roots in his legs were moving, slithering backward toward her like they were trying to return to their source. No, no, no. I yanked harder. His skin tore, muscle peeled, and he screamed louder than I'd ever heard. But I didn't stop.
I couldn't. I can't leave, he shrieked. She owns me.
Then I'll steal you back. And with that, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the only thing I had. The small, rusted hunting knife we found as kids. The one we buried under the same tree we first saw her from. The one Charlie had carved a face into long ago. His good luck charm. I raised it and brought it down on the roots. They screamed, not Charlie. Them. From the roots came a high, pitched wail like 1,000 mouths, crying out in unison. The entire church trembled. Her body convulsed at the front like I'd stabbed her directly. The roots writhed and twisted beneath Charlie's skin, and then, with a wet snap, they let go. I dragged him toward the side door. Behind us, she screamed, a deep, primal sound that rattled my teeth in my skull. The door didn't open easily. The hinges were sealed with sap. I slammed my shoulder into it once. Twice. The third time it gave. We tumbled out into the graveyard. But it was no graveyard anymore. The tombstones were gone. In their place were mounds of dirt, each with something writhing beneath the surface, as if the bodies had never died, or worse, were never meant to be buried. Charlie coughed violently, blood spilling from his lips. It's not just her, he rasped. She called them. What do you mean them? He looked up at me, eyes full of something I hadn't seen in him since we were kids, raw terror. There were others buried here, not people, things. This whole hollow is full of them. She's just the first one who woke up, and just like that, the mounds began to shift. One by one, they moved. The dirt cracked. Fingers, some too long, some too many, broke through. The creatures beneath weren't like her. They were older, hungrier, crawling toward us with faces that used to be human, now twisted with something else. Their mouths didn't scream. They sang. The same lullaby. Sleep now, little hollow seed. Nope. No. We are not doing this, I muttered, half lifting, half dragging Charlie toward the woods. The church behind us exploded into shrieks and cracks as she followed. The ground under our feet pulsed like a heartbeat. Roots slithered through the grass. The forest was thick, too thick, but I didn't care. We ran. Branches tore at us. Thorns ripped open skin. Every breath was fire. And all the while, behind us, the sound of the song. Slow, sweet. I think that was the worst part. It wasn't angry. It wasn't hunting us with fury. It was hunting us with love. It wanted us back. Back where we belonged. Faster! I shouted, dodging a tree root that whipped up like a striking snake. Charlie tried, but he collapsed again, too far gone. I can't, he groaned. I'm already halfway hers. Then I'll carry you. I threw him over my shoulder and pressed on. The trees began to change. Familiar markers. An old deer stand, a broken fence, told me we were nearing the edge of the hollow. Just a little further, just a few more steps. Not behind, ahead. A new voice, soft, gentle, come back, my own voice. Calling me, begging. I froze. Ahead of me stood me, not just a reflection, not a hallucination. A full-bodied replica, same blood-soaked shirt, same scars, same trembling eyes. Drop him, it said, tilting its head. He's hers. You know this. I raised the knife. It smiled. Not wide, not manic, just sad. You can't run from the hollow. It whispered. It remembers. Even when you forget. The trees behind me screamed as she approached. The ground ahead cracked as more things began crawling toward us. I was surrounded. I looked down at Charlie. He'd stopped breathing. No, I said quietly. Not like this. I dropped to my knees and carved the same symbol we'd etched on the knife into the dirt. The circle with the slash. The one we used to joke was our shield when we were kids. The ground hissed. The roots recoiled. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The hollow hated memory. It fed on what was forgotten, remembering. That hurt it. I whispered everything I could, names, dates. The first time Charlie and I skipped stones. The last time we saw his brother before he vanished. Our birthdays. The stupid song we made up about how ghosts hate peanut butter. The more I remembered, the more the forest screamed. The doppelganger clutched its head. The trees bled. The things crawling from the mounds howled and fled. And she shrieked loud enough to shatter bark. I stood, blood running down my arms, and carried Charlie the last few steps. When I broke the tree line, the air changed. Lighter, no more roots underfoot, no more breathing soil. Just silence. I turned. The hollow had sealed itself behind us. But I knew the truth now. It never stays shut, and it never forgets. I should have felt relief when the trees broke behind me, when the damp breath of the hollow stopped brushing the back of my neck. But there was no victory waiting on the other side. Only silence. A silence so thick it felt like the air was holding its breath, as if even the world beyond the hollow knew we didn't belong outside it anymore. Charlie's body was cold. Not dead cold, not yet, but getting there. I laid him down in the dead grass beside the old county road, the one no one drives anymore, and pressed my hand to his chest. Slow, fragile heartbeats whispered against my palm. He was still in there, buried under all that rot, all that creeping blackness, but still him. My phone was dead, no signal, no bars. Nothing but a black screen reflecting my own cracked, blood-covered face. I picked him up again. There was only one place to go, the old Marrow House. It had once been the heart of the town before the hollow swallowed everything else. An enormous farmhouse with rusted gates and windows like blind eyes. It had been abandoned since before Charlie and I were born, but everyone in Braxton knew better than to call it empty. No one touched it. Not even the town kids who claimed to be brave. Because we all remembered one thing, the Marrow House doesn't let go once it notices you. But it was the only place left where I thought I could hide. Not from her. Nothing hides from her, but from what came next. Because the hollow didn't chase us across the tree line. It didn't need to. It sent something worse instead. Charlie started twitching as I neared the front steps. His eyes fluttered open, and something was wrong with them. Not the color, not even the shape, but the placement. They were half a second too slow to track me, like someone watching me from behind his skull. Where are we? He slurred, voice muddy, slow. I didn't answer. I just pushed the front door open. The hinges didn't creak. No dust puffed up. No rats fled in the shadows. Everything inside was perfectly still, as if the house had been waiting for this moment. For us. The entryway was wide, the floorboards polished despite years of supposed abandonment. The air smelled of lavender, faint and bitter, like dried petals in an old drawer. Every light fixture buzzed with dim electricity, casting pale yellow halos across the long hallway that led deeper into the house. I didn't ask why the power worked. I didn't ask why the walls looked freshly painted. Because I already knew the answer. The Marrow house wanted us here. I carried Charlie into the parlor and laid him on the cracked leather couch. The second I did, the room sighed. No, not air, a sound, a voice almost too soft to notice. Back at last I turned, heart thundering. The room was empty. But something about the wallpaper, faded roses and thorns, seemed to pulse, ever so slightly, like it was breathing. I grabbed a blanket from the chair beside the fireplace and tucked it over Charlie. His eyes had rolled back now, lips whispering words I couldn't understand, but the tone was familiar. That lullaby again. Sleep now. Little hollow seed. He was humming it through clenched teeth. I backed out of the room, desperate to find something, anything, that would make sense of this. I tried the kitchen first. Every cabinet was empty, every drawer clean, but the stove, still warm. Someone had used it recently. The table held only one object, an old Polaroid photograph. I picked it up slowly. It was us. Charlie and I, maybe 12 years old, standing in front of the hollow's edge with our arms around each other. But there was a third figure in the picture, one I'd never seen before. A girl. Dark hair, bare feet, hollow black eyes. The picture felt damp. I dropped it and stepped back, a creak above me. I spun toward the stairs. Another step, slow, deliberate. Something was coming down. I gripped the broken knife in my pocket, now barely more than a handle and a shard. My hands trembled, but I waited. And then she stepped into view. It wasn't her. Not the thing from the hollow. This was someone else. An old woman, rail thin, skin stretched over her skull like paper, eyes cloudy with cataracts. She wore a tattered nightgown, her bare feet red with what looked like old blood. She looked at me and smiled. "You've been gone so long," she said. "But the house remembers." "Who are you?" I asked, throat dry. "I'm what was left after the hollow forgot." She replied, "A piece too stubborn to die." She drifted down the stairs like a leaf falling through water. Her fingers brushed the rail, and where they passed, the wood rotted. "Charlie needs to stay," she said gently. "He's already rooted. You're holding a tree by the stem, but the roots are buried too deep. You dig it up now, it'll die anyway. I'm not letting him die in that place." She nodded, slow and pitying. "He won't die. He'll change, like the rest of us." And then she reached into her mouth and pulled something out. A clump of black roots, still squirming. "Take this," she said. "Bury it where she first saw you. That's the only way you get a choice." I stared at the roots in her hand, trembling. "What happens if I do? Maybe she sleeps again," she whispered. "Maybe she doesn't. Maybe the hollow eats you whole. But if you don't, she grows. Into the world." Before I could ask more, she crumbled. Right there, turned to ash. No scream, no flash, just dust in the hallway. Behind me, Charlie groaned. I rushed back into the parlor. He was awake and crying. "I saw her," he gasped. "In the walls, in the sky, in me. She's everywhere." "Then we bury her," I said, holding up the clump of roots. They pulsed in my hand, warm, wet, humming. Charlie's eyes widened in terror. "No, she wants that. She wants you to bring her back to the start. It's a trick. But that woman was part of her. Don't you get it? Everything that survives her becomes another root, another mouth, another way to reach out." I froze. "Then what do we do?" He looked at me, defeated. "You have to kill me. That's the only way she stops feeding." "No, I'm already hers," he said. "I can feel her. Inside my skull, whispering, dreaming through me." "No, Charlie." "Then run," he begged. Leave me. Before she wakes up again. I stood there shaking, holding the roots, feeling their heartbeat against my skin, knowing he was right, and doing the worst thing I could have done. I didn't kill him. I didn't run. I listened to her. Because outside, through the parlor window, the trees were moving again, and they were getting closer. Outside the parlor window, the trees stood still, at first, but the longer I stared, the more wrong they became. Not by shape or size, but by posture. They weren't swaying with the wind, not bending under their own weight. They were leaning forward, like they were listening. No wind touched them. No birds stirred in their branches, yet they creaked, groaned, adjusted themselves, and I knew they weren't trees anymore. They were watchers. I backed away from the glass, heart thudding like fists against wood. Charlie's breathing was shallow now, coming in short, painful gasps. The black veins running down his legs had crawled up past his hips, spiderwebbing across his chest. His skin had taken on a waxy sheen, like fruit left too long in the sun. But his eyes, God, his eyes were still him. Still terrified. Still trying to hold on. She knows you're here, he whispered. She knows you're thinking. That's how she finds her way in. Thinking? He nodded slowly. When you remember her, she grows. She spreads. That's what she feeds on. Thought, memory, emotion. It's how she gets out of the hollow. Through us. It made a sick kind of sense. The more I tried to make sense of what happened, the more power I gave her. Every time I pieced it together. Every time I recalled the moment we dug into the hill, the look on his face when we uncovered that pit, the thing that blinked from the earth, she moved closer. No wonder she filled our dreams. No wonder her lullaby echoed in our thoughts. We were helping her grow just by trying to understand. I looked down at the roots in my hand, the ones the old woman had handed me. They pulsed still, rhythmically, like a second heart trying to beat through my palm. I should have dropped them right there, should have burned them, crushed them beneath my heel. But I couldn't, because deep down, some part of me still hoped she could be contained. That there was still a path to fix all this. A path that didn't end with Charlie rotting into soil, or with me being chased down by trees that remembered my name. I need to go back, I said quietly. Charlie tried to sit up but couldn't. The vines on his chest tensed, pulling him back into the cushions like the couch had grown hands. She wants you to go back. I don't care what she wants. I do, he rasped, because she's been talking to me. His voice changed with that last word, lower, slower, too calm. His pupils dilated until they nearly swallowed the whites of his eyes. A shadow passed over his face. It didn't move with the light. It was something else. Something inside him. She says it's almost time, he whispered. She's almost remembered how to leave. All she needs is for you to dig. The roots in my hand surged. A flash of images struck my brain like a needle to the spine. Us as children again. Standing at the edge of the hill, digging with rusted shovels. The blood-soaked face of Charlie's brother staring from the earth. The sound of her voice, but before she had words, just a tone, a vibration of terror and longing. She showed me, Charlie said, eyes glossy now. What happens next? I leaned closer. She doesn't kill people. Not really. She keeps them, inside her. She grows from them, and she's already in you. You think you ran from the hollow. You brought it with you. The realization hit like a brick. My stomach turned. My hand clenched, trying to drop the roots, but it wouldn't open. My fingers had fused around them. Skin had grown over the edges. They were inside me now. I stumbled back, nearly collapsing. No, I muttered. No, no, no. She remembers you, Charlie said again, voice softer now. She remembers your face, your guilt, your promises. All of it. And she's hungry. I ran, not out of fear, though I was scared out of my mind, but out of instinct. I didn't know where I was going. Only that I couldn't stay in that room, couldn't be near Charlie as he became something else. The house shifted as I ran. Hallways elongated. Doors closed without sound. The smell of lavender grew stronger, more cloying, more rotten. Like something trying to hide the scent of decay. Pictures on the walls blinked when I passed. Carpets rippled like skin. And then I reached the attic. I didn't remember climbing the stairs. I didn't even remember choosing this room. But here I was, standing in the dim glow of moonlight streaming through a cracked window. Dust hung in the air, unmoving. A rocking chair creaked in the far corner, even though no one sat in it, or so I thought. As I stepped closer, I saw the outline, not a person, a shell. Hollow, made of something like dried clay. Cracked down the spine. It was shaped like a child curled in on itself, arms wrapped around its knees, face buried. On the floor beside it was a small box, wrapped in an old handkerchief stained with black blotches. I knelt, trembling, and opened the box. Inside was a lock of hair, curled, black, still damp. And beneath it, a note. She was never buried, only forgotten. I couldn't breathe, because I remembered something. A face, a real one. A girl we used to play with, Charlie, me, and her. We thought she was imaginary, a game, a story we made up to pass the summer days. Her name was Ellie, but she was real. And we left her behind. She doesn't want revenge, a voice said behind me. I spun. Charlie stood in the doorway. His veins were black now, his skin gray, but his eyes were calm. She wants to be remembered, he said. Fully, completely. Not just the pain, not just the death. He held out his hand. She wants her name back. I took it. The roots pulsed between our palms. And then the walls began to breathe. Not just the house, but the air. The wind outside picked up, rattling the windows. The trees moved again. Not watching. Moving toward us. The floorboards groaned beneath the weight of something unseen. She's coming, Charlie whispered. No, I said. She's already here. Because I could feel her now. In the bones of the house, in the light of the moon. In the way my heart skipped not with fear, but recognition. Ellie was never a monster. She was left behind. We opened her grave. We fed her with our silence. And now, the only way to stop her was to remember everything. Even the parts we wanted to forget. There's a kind of silence that doesn't wait for your permission. It walks right into you, slides behind your ribs, and settles like frost in your bones. That's the silence that filled the attic after Charlie spoke her name. Ellie. Just saying it felt like ripping open a scar that had been badly stitched shut. My chest tightened. My throat closed. But I didn't speak. I couldn't. Not yet. The name was a match to memories I'd buried so deep I didn't think they'd ever resurface. Not nightmares. Worse. Real things living in the fog between dreams and guilt, sharpened by time. It started as a flicker, a girl with hair like wet leaves and skin always a little too cold. Ellie had been part of every game we played, every dare we made, but no one else ever saw her. No parents, no neighbors, just Charlie and me. Everyone said we made her up. We believed them. Until now. Charlie stood in the threshold of the attic, eyes sunken deep, veins crawling beneath his skin like worms searching for a way out. But he wasn't entirely gone. There was something behind his voice now. Something that hadn't been there when we escaped the hollow. Clarity. A sliver of the boy I used to know, fighting against what was growing inside him. She remembers everything, he said, not stepping closer. Even the parts we made ourselves forget. My knees buckled, and I dropped to the floor. The box still in my lap. The lock of hair curled against my palm, alive with memory. And suddenly, it came flooding back. Not as flashes or sounds, but as a feeling. That summer, the heat, the smell of dirt and sweat and rusted tools. The game. Let's bury a secret, Ellie had whispered to us, hands trembling with excitement. We were kids. We didn't understand. We thought it was pretend, like hiding a treasure. She told us to dig, deeper, deeper, until the earth turned black and thick, and our arms ached from shoveling. I'll go in, she said, smiling. You just have to promise not to forget. And we promised, with fingers crossed behind our backs. That's what destroyed her. We left her in that hole, covered her with dirt and lies and laughter, told ourselves it was a game, that she wasn't real. And the hollow took her grief and grew it. She never wanted to hurt us, Charlie murmured. She just wanted to be found. The wind outside howled suddenly, loud and guttural, as if the house had sucked in a sharp breath. Floorboards snapped and moaned below. The lights flickered, and the walls darkened, turning the faded floral wallpaper into veins and ash. "She's coming," I whispered. Charlie stepped forward, struggling to keep balance. His legs dragged slightly, like something beneath the floor was trying to pull him down. "I don't think she wants to hurt us now, either," he said, wincing as black tendrils pulsed beneath his skin. "But she will, if we don't give her what she needs." I looked at the roots still wrapped around my hand, now sunk so deep I couldn't see where skin ended and they began. They pulsed in sync with something larger, something waiting. Ellie wasn't a ghost. She wasn't even a monster. She was a wound, and we were the ones who opened her. "So what do we do?" I asked. "We finish what we started," Charlie said. "We bring her home." The house shuddered violently. A deafening creak echoed from below as the floorboards split open in the parlor. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Somewhere downstairs, glass shattered and something heavy moved through the walls. Not walking. Crawling. Charlie's face twisted in pain. He grabbed the edge of the window to keep from falling as the house tilted slightly, groaning under some impossible pressure. Outside, the trees had begun to surround the house, not swaying now, but circling like wolves closing in on a dying deer. "She's here," he hissed. "In the roots." We rushed downstairs, the staircase shaking beneath our feet. Each step we took felt like walking into the belly of something that had already begun to digest us. In the parlor, the ground had cracked wide open. Beneath the floor, the soil breathed. It moved. The room reeked of sap and old blood. In the center of the hole, something had begun to grow. A shape, small, curled, covered in black moss, like a child sleeping under the dirt. Ellie. Not her body. Not exactly. Something born from what we left behind. "She's been waiting for us," Charlie said, "to remember her, to see her." He stepped toward the hole. The roots from his legs reached out, connecting to the mass like veins rejoining an organ. His eyes rolled back, and for a moment he dropped to his knees. The roots pulsed brighter. "She's inside me," he whispered. "I can feel her thoughts, her pain." I hesitated. Everything in me screamed to run, to burn the house to the ground and salt the hollow until nothing ever grew again. But I knew it wouldn't work. We fed her. And the only way to stop her was to give something back. "What does she want?" I asked, barely above a whisper. "She wants to be remembered," Charlie said again, completely. "Not as a monster. Not as a mistake, but as Ellie." I stepped to the edge of the pit and knelt beside the shape. The roots pulled back, and I saw her, eyes closed, face serene, as if she were still the same girl who used to giggle when we dared each other to sneak into the woods. Tears welled in my eyes. I took the box from my pocket, opened it, and gently placed the lock of hair on her chest. Then, for the first time in 15 years, I spoke her name out loud, fully, without shame. "Ellie Harper." The room froze, no creaking, no pulsing, no breathing, just silence. And then she opened her eyes. They weren't black pits or glowing coals. They were just eyes. Brown, soft, scared. Her lips parted slightly, as if to speak, but no sound came, only the faintest smile. Then she began to fade, not vanish, not dissolve. Release. The roots receded. The breath of the house grew still. Outside, the trees stepped back into their places, their bark no longer twisted. The light returned to the windows, golden and weak but natural. Charlie collapsed beside her, panting. "She's gone," he said. "Not trapped, not feeding, just gone." The shape in the pit crumbled, gently, like ash. The soil closed over her without force, without malice. Just soft earth reclaiming what it should have never lost. We sat there for a long time. Two survivors. Two fools. Two brothers of memory and guilt. breathing clean air for the first time in days. But deep down, I knew it wasn't the end. The hollow is old, older than memory, older than guilt. And Ellie was only the first. The hollow didn't die with Ellie. It just went quiet. And that silence wasn't relief. It was restraint. A deep, humming stillness that felt too calm, like a forest before lightning strikes. Like breath held too long. Charlie and I sat in the ruined parlor, staring at the place where Ellie had vanished, her body crumbled to ash and memory. The roots had slithered back into the soil, and the house no longer pulsed or groaned. But something told me we hadn't saved anyone. We'd just bought time. Charlie was weak, his skin pallid and tight. The black veins had stopped growing, but they remained, twitching faintly like spider legs just beneath his skin. He tried to stand but collapsed again, groaning. "I thought she was it," I said, wiping my face with trembling hands. "I thought if we remembered her, if we gave her peace, it would be over." Charlie gave a bitter smile, his lips cracked and dry. She was the first, not the only. I looked around the room. The air felt clearer now, but that clarity made the place seem more sinister. We'd peeled back a layer of rot, only to find more decay beneath, and that realization landed like a rock in my chest. Ellie wasn't the disease. She was just one symptom. The hollow was the disease. "They're still down there," Charlie said after a long pause. "I can feel them. Beneath us, in the dirt, not sleeping, not dead, waiting." I stood slowly, walking to the window. The forest beyond the Marrow house had returned to its familiar stillness. No shadows moved. No branches shook. But the feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. Because now I understood something even worse than what we'd just seen. The hollow doesn't create monsters. It keeps them. And someone put them there. "Charlie," I said, turning back to him. A sudden thought blooming cold and sharp. What if the hollow wasn't accidentally full of the dead? He didn't answer. What if it's always been a cage? He closed his eyes, like he'd already known, and hadn't wanted to admit it. "Not a burial ground," I continued. "A prison." The house creaked, not from pressure, not from decay, but like it was listening. I could feel it pressing in around us, like walls eavesdropping. The hollow was quiet, but I didn't believe for a second that it had gone dormant. It was watching. The Marrow house was older than Braxton Hollow itself. It had been here long before settlers came, long before roads were carved through the trees. The original owners. No one remembered them, or more accurately, no one talked about them. Which meant they were important. Which meant they were dangerous. I helped Charlie up, throwing his arm over my shoulder, and together we limped toward the library at the back of the house. I'd only been inside it once as a kid, back when the house was still considered off limits, when it still had power in the town's folklore. The room had always seemed endless, lined floor to ceiling with books that smelled like copper and mildew. A place where stories waited to wake up. We pushed open the double doors. Dust billowed up in clouds, but everything else was untouched. Dozens of books sat on shelves, untouched by time. I walked slowly, trailing my fingers along the spines until I stopped at a volume that looked newer than the rest. Its leather was cracked but still soft, and it bore a symbol I hadn't seen in years. A circle carved with a single line through the middle. The mark we'd carved on the knife. The mark Ellie drew in the dirt. I opened the book. There were no words, only drawings, sketches done in jagged ink, of roots growing out of people, of figures half buried in pits, of children with their mouths sewn shut. On the last page, I found something that made my heart stop. A map, not of Braxton Hollow, but what lay beneath it. Tunnels, chambers, sealed pits marked with names written in Latin and symbols I couldn't even begin to guess at. Some had dates. Others just had numbers, quantities. How many were buried? And in the center of the map, a large black mark with one word written beneath it in the old tongue. Custis. Keeper. I translated aloud. Charlie nodded, pale as ash. That's what the hollow is. A keeper. Of what? Things that were never meant to die, he whispered. My hands shook as I traced the paths on the map. There were so many sealed places, and Ellie had only come from one. We hadn't cleansed anything. We'd disturbed the order. The keeper was breaking apart, not because we defeated it, but because we remembered it. Memory is a crack in the wall. And now the rest could smell daylight through the break. What if waking her was the first knock? I asked. And now the rest are listening. Charlie didn't speak. He just looked at the wall. Dozens of portraits lined the room, their eyes painted black with time. One of them, a man in a dark coat, with hands crossed neatly over a book, stood out. There was something too familiar about his face. Something I couldn't place until Charlie said it. That's my grandfather. I turned sharply. Your grandfather. He lived here. He was the last marrow to walk into the hollow and come back out. After that, he went mad. Said things lived in the dirt. Things with no names, no mouths. Did he bury them? I asked. Charlie looked down. No, he fed them. The pit in my stomach turned molten. I understood now. The hollow wasn't just a trap. It was a deal. Something ancient, something wrong, had been fed to stay quiet. Ellie wasn't its prisoner. She was its first escapee. Then who sealed it? I asked. Who kept them there? The house, Charlie whispered. The family. The ones who remembered why they needed to. I turned back to the map. We'd forgotten too much. And the hollow wasn't a secret anymore. It was leaking. We had two options: try to reseal it, or run and watch it consume the world inch by inch, dream by dream. And I already knew I couldn't run. Not again. Not with the dirt still clinging to my soul. Then the floor began to hum. Charlie looked up. His skin had turned pale again, the veins pulsing faster. She's not alone anymore, he said. They're waking up. All of them. The books on the shelf began to tremble. Dust rained from the ceiling. The marrow house groaned, louder than before. Something cracked in the floor beneath us. I didn't need to ask where we were going. Back to the hollow. But this time, we weren't digging anything up. This time, we were going underneath it. We left the marrow house before sunrise, carrying the map, the knife, and the weight of something much older than our bones. The house didn't protest. It just watched us go, boards creaking in soft farewell, as if it knew we weren't coming back the same, if at all. Outside, the forest stood still. Not peaceful, not lifeless. It felt like walking through a room where something had just been murdered and everyone was pretending it hadn't happened. Even the birds were silent, like they feared their song might wake something better left asleep. Charlie walked slowly beside me, limping heavily. His skin had paled even more, and the black roots beneath his veins twitched with impatience. They weren't done with him, and he knew it. We both did, but he didn't speak a word of pain or fear. His eyes were focused, burning with something I hadn't seen since we were kids. Purpose. Whatever lay underneath the hollow, he was ready to face it. Or at least, he was willing to die trying. We followed the old firebreak path behind the marrow house, past the overgrown cemetery where headstones leaned like drunks whispering secrets. According to the map, the entrance to the buried tunnels wasn't in the hill where we found Ellie, but deeper. Beneath the ridge behind the old church. A place the locals had always called the breach. No one ever went near it. The ground there sank unnaturally, and the air tasted metallic. But now we understood why. It was the hollow's original mouth. The one it used before the forest grew teeth. It took us hours to reach it, and when we did, we stopped without speaking. The land sloped down into a wide basin filled with moss, mushrooms, and something that looked too much like human hair growing in clumps from the soil. In the center was a mound of stone, rough, unnatural, arranged in the shape of a crude door, not built, placed, as if someone long ago had tried to cap a wound. The stone pulsed, not visibly, but I could feel it in my teeth, like a distant heartbeat, low and constant, waiting to be acknowledged. "This is it," Charlie said quietly. The lock. The map had been clear. This was the center of the web. All the tunnels, all the burial chambers, spiraled out from this point like veins. And if the hollow had a heart, it beat beneath this stone. How do we open it? I asked. Charlie reached into his pocket and pulled out something I hadn't seen him take from the house. A small iron key. Ornate, blackened with age. It was hidden behind his portrait, he said. My grandfather's. I stared at the key, then the stone door. There's no keyhole. There doesn't have to be, he said. Not when you remember. He knelt before the stone and placed the key against it. Nothing happened. Until Charlie spoke. I remember the first voice. The key began to sink into the stone. Not twist, not turn, just melt in. I remember the second face. The one we couldn't bury. The moss around the mound turned black, curling into ash. I remember the third scream. The one that never stopped. The stone cracked down the middle with a sound like ribs breaking under weight. And then the earth opened. Not with violence. With intention. A tunnel yawned below us, round and smooth, sloping downward into dark. The air that wafted up from it wasn't cold, but wet, like breath from an open mouth that hadn't exhaled in centuries. And from below came a sound. Not a growl, not a whisper, a chant. Not in words, in memory. I felt it press against the inside of my skull, my childhood, my failures. Every time I looked away from suffering, every promise I broke, every thought I buried. It wasn't just a tunnel, it was a mirror. We stepped inside. The walls closed behind us. At first, the path was narrow, made of packed earth that pulsed beneath our feet. But the deeper we went, the more the tunnel changed. It became smoother, polished, as if the inside of the hollow had been worn by centuries of passage. The walls were lined with carvings, faces frozen in screams, mouths wide open but hollow. Some had eyes, others didn't. One had my face. Charlie didn't stop, not when he bled from the nose, not when the air turned thick like syrup. He walked, dragging his infected legs, whispering her name over and over like a prayer. Ellie. 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 The tunnel split into 3 paths. The map had said it would. Left led to the husk room, a place where bodies had been preserved, not by salt or science, but by will. Right led to the bone spire, a chamber built of skeletons arranged like a cathedral. Straight ahead lay the throat. We chose forward. The chanting grew louder. The walls began to move, like muscle twitching under skin. Our footsteps echoed back to us seconds late, warped and wrong, like someone else was walking just behind. And then we entered the heart. The chamber was enormous, far too large to exist under a hill. It felt like a cathedral built by something that didn't understand physics or mercy. The ceiling was alive with roots that dripped glowing sap. In the center stood a tree, dead, blackened, leafless, and around its base were mounds, dozens, hundreds, each one softly rising and falling. Not graves, breathing. They're not dead, I whispered. Charlie shook his head. They're remembering. Each mound contained a person, or what was left of one. Their bodies weren't rotting. They were dreaming, remembering everything they'd ever been, every horror they'd ever seen, every failure, every pain, feeding the hollow with memory. This was the deal, not burial, containment. A prison built not of bars, but of unforgotten agony. And the tree in the center, that was the warden. It pulsed with light, faint, dying. But I knew what it was. The seal, I said. It's failing, because we remembered too much, because we broke the silence. Charlie limped forward. I can stop it. But it means staying, becoming part of the root. No, it's what Ellie wanted. Not revenge, not blood, a replacement. Someone to watch. He looked at me and smiled through tears. We started this together, but only one of us walks out. I grabbed his shoulder. We'll find another way. But he was already stepping into the roots. They reached for him like children welcoming a parent. His body lifted, his eyes turned white, and his voice became hers, and his grandfather's, and Ellie's, and mine. Close your eyes, he said, and then the tree breathed in. The chamber shook. The roots curled inward. The mound stopped rising and falling, and everything went still. Charlie was gone. The hollow had a new keeper. I stumbled out alone, covered in soil and blood and silence. The tunnel closed behind me, and Braxton Hollow slept again. But not forever, because someday someone will remember, and the keeper will have to wake. Weeks passed. Or at least, that's what the calendar said. Outside the hollow, time moved like it always had. Sun rising, moon circling, seasons shifting like breath. But I didn't feel it. Time had become brittle for me, fragile, like dried bark ready to snap. I'd returned to the world. To noise, electricity, concrete, and phone calls I didn't answer. I slept in a bed again, ate real food, smiled when strangers made small talk, but none of it felt real. Because some part of me never left the hollow. Some part of me was still beneath that black tree, staring into the eyes of a friend as he offered himself to silence. I moved into a small apartment 2 towns over, just far enough that no one in Braxton would bump into me at the store. Just close enough that I could still feel the tremble in the earth when the hollow dreamed. I kept the map. I kept the knife. And every night, I'd take both out, spread them on my kitchen table, and wait for what I didn't know. Maybe a voice. Maybe a crack in the sky. Maybe Charlie whispering through the roots. It started small, a dream. Charlie standing in a field of dry grass, barefoot, his hands stained with soil. He didn't speak, just stared at me with eyes that weren't his anymore. His skin had turned to bark, and thin vines ran from the corners of his mouth, twitching when the wind blew. The next night, the dream returned. This time he pointed. Behind him, the tree, dead, silent, but at its base was a new mound, fresh, breathing. And the third night, he finally spoke. "She remembers you too." I woke gasping. My hands clenched so tightly I'd drawn blood. I stumbled to the table, pulled out the map, and stared at the place marked Custis. My fingers moved before my brain did. They traced a new line, one that hadn't been there before. A crack in the pattern, a split, as if something was forming beneath the soil, trying to make its own way out. Charlie had sealed it, but the hollow was restless, and I was still its key. The next day, I returned to Braxton. The town hadn't changed. The diner still smelled like burnt coffee. The gas station still had that buzz in the lights that made your head itch. And the people. They didn't look at me. Not the way strangers ignore you, but like someone trying not to flinch when they pass a grave. I didn't blame them. They knew something had happened. They just didn't want to remember. I drove through town in silence, windows down, letting the summer air cling to my skin. Everything was green again. Lush. Too lush. The trees looked too full, like they were growing faster than they should. The vines on the old telephone poles wrapped tighter. The ground beneath my tires felt soft, spongy, alive. I parked near the edge of the woods and walked the rest of the way. No trail marked this path. No signs warned of what waited ahead. But I didn't need them. The hollow called me. It was faint at first, like pressure behind the eyes. Then soundless whispers, memories of voices I'd long buried. My mother laughing, Ellie crying, Charlie yelling my name in the dark. I pushed deeper into the forest. The trees leaned closer. The sun dimmed behind their leaves. And then I reached the edge, the hollow. It looked the same, but something had changed. The hill was larger. The tree that once marked Ellie's grave was gone, its roots now twisted into a new formation. A spiral, a symbol I recognized from the map. It meant open. That's when I saw the footprints. Bare, small, leading from the center of the hill into the trees. I followed. The forest darkened fast. The shadows didn't shift naturally. They moved like curtains being drawn by unseen hands. The air thickened with the smell of wet earth and something sweeter, riper, like fruit left too long on the vine. Then I saw her, a girl, standing in a clearing. She looked no older than 8. Black hair, pale skin, barefoot, wearing a tattered dress that looked soaked in sap. "Ellie," I whispered. She turned. but it wasn't her. The eyes were wrong, too wide, too empty, like someone wearing Ellie's face, stitched on over a blank canvas. She smiled. You came back. My throat dried. Where's Charlie? He's home. She pointed to the ground. Where you left him. I didn't leave him. He chose. He remembered. That's all it takes. She took a step closer. The air thickened. The roots beneath the ground twitched. There are others now, she said. Ones waking up. Ones that don't want to be kept. They're not like me. They don't want memories. Then what do they want? She smiled wider. To be forgotten forever. Behind her, the trees cracked open. And out stepped the first one. It wasn't human. Not even close. A creature of bone and ash and fluid motion. Its face was a mess of skin stretched over too many teeth. It didn't look angry. It looked empty. You opened the door, she said. Now you have to choose. Choose what? To seal it again, she whispered. Or to let them out. I shook my head. Why would I do that? Because it's not about you anymore, she said, her voice softer now. They're waking up in dreams. All over. People feel them. People feed them without knowing. She stepped closer, close enough that I could see something writhing beneath her skin. It's already begun. She placed something in my hand. A seed. Black. Pulsing. Bury it, she said. In the right soil it remembers. In the wrong soil it releases. Then she vanished. I stood alone in the clearing, seed in hand, heart pounding with the weight of a choice I never wanted. Seal it, or unleash it. The forest behind me rustled with something large moving just beyond sight, and I knew, without a doubt, Charlie had bought time. But I was going to have to buy the rest. I didn't bury the seed. Not that day. Not in that forest. I couldn't. My hands wouldn't move. Fingers locked tight around the pulsing thing, as if it were fused to my palm. Every instinct screamed at me to cast it into fire, grind it into the earth, crush it beneath stone. But I knew what that would mean. The girl, or the thing wearing her face, had made it clear in the wrong soil the seed releases. Not plants, not roots, them. The ones that hadn't been remembered. The ones who wanted out not for revenge, not for reckoning, but to vanish, to erase, and in doing so, erase everything else around them. I stumbled back through the woods, heart pounding against my ribs like it wanted out. The trees whispered with every step, but not in voices I understood. They weren't speaking to me. They were speaking to the seed. The moment I realized that, I looked down, and the damn thing was glowing, faint, sickly, but enough to make my skin crawl. When I finally reached my car, I threw the seed into the glove compartment, slammed it shut, and drove. I didn't know where. Anywhere with pavement and people. Anywhere that didn't smell like damp leaves and old sorrow. The forest shrank behind me in the rearview mirror, but the weight in my chest didn't. I drove until the sun dipped below the hills, until the sky turned purple and the road lights buzzed on with that soft electric hum. I pulled into a motel that didn't ask questions and checked into a room that smelled like bleach and old regrets. I didn't even take off my jacket. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the door like I expected something to slither underneath it. That night I dreamed. Not of Charlie. Not of Ellie. But of soil. Black, endless soil. Stretching in every direction like a sea with no sky. I stood in the center of it, the seed still in my hand, and the ground beneath me writhed. I knelt without meaning to and started digging. My nails cracked. My skin peeled. Still, I dug. And every time I pulled away a handful of dirt, something breathed beneath it. Not words, not thought. Just absence, like digging into a mouth without a tongue. Then I found it. A hole, perfectly round, waiting. The seed burned in my hand. I tried to drop it. I couldn't. I tried to scream. I couldn't. So I planted it, and as I pushed soil over it, I heard them. Thank you. I woke choking, drenched in sweat. The motel room humming with a pressure I couldn't name. Something was in the air, pressing down like invisible hands on my shoulders. I checked the glove box. The seed was gone. Panic hit me so fast I nearly blacked out. I tore through the car, ripping open every crevice, checking the tires, the trunk, the dirt beneath the floor mats. Nothing. Then I noticed the footprints. Small, bare, leading away from the car. Back toward town. I drove like a madman, tires screeching on back roads, the lines on the highway blurring in my vision. Every shadow looked alive. Every tree looked like it remembered. And when I hit Braxton again, I could feel it before I saw it. The change. The town was too quiet. Not just sleepy. Held, breath quiet. Houses dark. Stores closed. No cars on the road. No lights in the windows. And when I turned onto Main Street, I slammed the brakes. The entire street was wet. The pavement slick with something dark. Not blood. Not oil. Sap. It pooled in the gutters, glistened on windowsills. Vines crawled up the lamp posts. They hadn't been there yesterday. The air smelled sweet and rotting, like fruit breaking down in the sun. And then I saw them. People. Standing still. On sidewalks. In doorways. In cars that hadn't moved. Dozens of them. All facing the same direction. Toward the woods. I rolled down the window. The sound hit me like a brick. Whispers. 1,000 of them. But they weren't whispering to each other. They were whispering in unison. A chant. Soft. Unintelligible. But it made the hair on my arms stand straight. I stepped out of the car. Their eyes followed me. Slowly. Together. Not blinking. Not alive. I took a step forward. They didn't move. Then someone stepped out of the diner. A little girl. Barefoot. Black dress. The one who had handed me the seed, Ellie. I asked, barely able to breathe. She shook her head. No, she said, voice too calm. She's sleeping now. Who are you? The first root, she said. The one forgotten. Before names. Before faces. I took a step back. She smiled. You planted it. I didn't. In the dream, she said. That's all it takes. And just like that, the ground cracked. Right in the center of Main Street, a fracture split the asphalt. Wide. Deep. And from it came not fire. Not smoke, but breath. Wet. Cold. Alive. The townspeople turned as one. And then they began to walk. Not run. Not scream. Just walk. Into the crack. One by one. Like it was where they'd been heading all along. I screamed. I begged. I tried to grab one of them. A man I vaguely remembered from the gas station. His skin crumbled at my touch, like bark flaking from a dead tree. They weren't people anymore. They were memories. And I had fed the hollow another mouth. The girl looked up at me, her eyes now completely black. Do you understand yet? She asked. This was never about Ellie, or Charlie, or you. Then what was it about? She smiled, returned. And from the crack came a sound that shattered every lie I had ever told myself. Applause. Slow. Mocking. And then, the laughing. The sound of the applause didn't echo. It didn't travel or bounce like normal sound should. It folded into me, like a hand clapping just behind my eyes. Slow, rhythmic, and cold. I staggered backward from the crack in the street, but the ground kept shifting beneath my feet, softening, warping. The air turned thick and syrupy, as if the town was being dipped in molasses, preserving it for something worse. The girl, the thing in her skin, watched me calmly, her arms at her sides, her expression unchanged. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. Just stared like someone who knew how it all ended and had been waiting for me to catch up. Who's clapping? I managed to say. She tilted her head. The ones beneath. My pulse screamed against my skin. You said they wanted to be forgotten. She stepped toward me, her bare feet making no sound on the wet pavement. They did. But you didn't let them. You dug. You remembered. You fed us with your fear, then dressed it up in forgiveness. She smiled faintly. They don't want to be free anymore. They want to perform. Behind her, the townspeople kept walking, single file into the crack. No screams, no hesitation. Just the steady, silent descent of a town letting itself be swallowed whole. My legs gave out. I dropped to my knees, staring into the fissure as the shadows below churned with movement. Faces drifted just beneath the surface, half-formed, melting, stitched together with moss and bone. Some of them I recognized. My second, grade teacher, the man who ran the bait shop, the sheriff, even kids who shouldn't have known this place, people who had never been part of the Hollow. What are they doing to them? I asked, voice shaking. They're rewriting them, she said softly, crouching beside me now. Not killing, changing, making them useful. Useful for what? For what comes next. The air changed then, snapped like a rubber band pulled too tight, and suddenly the sky turned wrong. Not black, not dark, just wrong. Color drained from everything, like the Hollow was inhaling the world's light. My breath caught. My ears popped. Every instinct in me screamed that I didn't belong here, that I'd stepped into a place between places, where rules didn't apply, where time folded, where names were currency and forgetting was a death sentence. I looked down and realized the seed was back in my hand. I hadn't picked it up. I hadn't even seen it return. It had chosen to return. Where am I supposed to bury this? I whispered. She looked up at me. Her smile dropped. For the first time, her voice trembled. You're not supposed to bury it, she said. I blinked. Then why give it to me? Because you already have. It clicked in an instant. The dream, the earth, the breath, it wasn't a dream, it was a memory. A memory the Hollow made real. The seed had taken root. The moment I covered it in dream, dirt, the contract was signed. And now the roots weren't spreading through the Hollow. They were spreading through me. That's why the faces in the crack looked familiar. That's why time felt brittle. The Hollow wasn't growing into the world. It was growing through me. I didn't mean to, I gasped. Meaning is meat, she whispered. The Hollow doesn't eat intent, it eats acts. The applause continued, faster now, urgent, and from within the crack, a hand emerged, not grasping, not crawling, clapping. It was pale, too long, the fingers bent wrong, and on the palm was a mouth. It smiled. Then another hand rose. Then a head, and finally, a figure pulled itself out, not with effort, not with violence, but with grace, like a performer taking the stage. It stood tall, skeletal but fluid, its skin a tight wrap of bark and scar, its ribs open like theater curtains. Its face was mine, or something close. It looked at me and opened its arms. Bravo, it said. My vision blurred. I tasted metal. What are you? I whispered. It smiled wider. I'm the echo you made permanent. The memory you wouldn't burn. I'm the keeper who never left. Charlie. No, it said, head tilting. Charlie kept the door shut. You made sure it would open again. I stumbled back. The townspeople had vanished. Only I remained. And the girl. And this version of me. You could have let the Hollow die, it said gently. All you had to do was forget. All you had to do was leave the scar untouched. I couldn't, I said. She was real. Ellie. We? Charlie and I, we caused that? You remembered, the figure said. You pulled her back. You mourned her. And in doing so, you woke us all up. My knees hit the ground. You're saying it's my fault. I'm saying, it said, walking toward me now, that memory has weight. And you're kind. You carry it like it's sacred. You polish your guilt. You bury your shame and call it closure. It leaned close. We call it soil. I clenched the seed in my hand. It pulsed, fast and panicked, like it knew I was about to make a choice. Can I stop it? I asked. The figure laughed. Would you really try after all this? After all the names you rescued from the dirt? After how good it felt to matter? To hurt properly? I raised the knife. The broken, rusted blade from our childhood. From the summer we made promises we couldn't keep. I don't care what it felt like, I said. It stopped. Then bleed, it said. And maybe, we'll let the others sleep a little longer. I didn't hesitate. I stabbed the seed, right through the palm. It screamed. The forest shrieked. The sky cracked. The Hollow shuddered. The figure staggered back, howling, not in pain, but in rage. The girl began to dissolve, her body flaking like burnt paper. The crack in the road slammed shut, and then silence. Real silence, no whispers, no breath, just stillness. I was alone again, holding only the knife, and a seed split clean in two. But I knew better. Nothing in the hollow dies. It just forgets how to move. For now. For days after the seed split, I waited for the world to break again. I kept thinking the sky would crack open, that black vines would spill through ceiling tiles, that shadows would stretch too far down hallways. But nothing came. No more applause. No hollow children knocking at my door. Just silence. And the silence was louder than anything. The town of Braxton didn't recover. It didn't scream or crumble or burn. It simply emptied. I went back a week later, maybe 2. I'd stopped counting days by then. The gas station stood untouched, lights flickering behind dust-covered glass. The diner booths were still full of half-finished meals. Coffee mugs cooled where hands used to be, but there were no people, no cars, not even birds overhead. Just the heavy stench of memory thick in the air, like something had fed here and moved on. And the hollow, gone. Not physically. The forest was still there, trees still standing. But the pressure was absent. The kind of pressure you only notice when it's suddenly lifted. The forest felt lighter now, like a predator that had finally eaten and retreated into sleep. But I knew it wouldn't last. Because something had changed, not just in the hollow, but in me. It started in my sleep, dreams that bled into waking. I'd blink and find myself walking barefoot through ash, speaking words I didn't know, humming that cursed lullaby in a voice that didn't feel like mine. I'd wake with dirt under my nails, sometimes blood, sometimes both. But the worst was the taste. Metallic, fungal. Like something had sprouted inside my throat and was growing slowly, patiently. One night, I looked in the mirror and saw a root coiled around my tongue. I didn't scream. I pressed 2 fingers into my mouth, grabbed hold and pulled. It fought me, twisted, dug in. But I won. When I dropped it into the sink, it shriveled into dust, hissing. I stopped sleeping after that. Instead, I read the map, every night, studying the branching patterns, the spirals, the ancient marks that only made sense when I wasn't trying to understand them. Some nights the map would change, just slightly. New symbols, new paths. One corner began growing darker with each passing week, the paper warping as if heat or rot had touched it. That corner was marked with a single symbol, a circle with 3 slashes, and I remembered it. Barely. The 3rd chamber. The one Charlie didn't take me to. The one even his grandfather refused to speak of. The place called the Rot. According to the markings, it was deeper than Custis, beneath even the bone spire, below everything, a place the hollow didn't protect or contain, but avoided. And now, the map wanted me there. The ink had darkened around it. The path to it, once faint, was bolder now, as if the forest wanted me to see it, to walk it. And I would. Not out of bravery, not out of duty, out of fear. Because something had begun tapping. Not outside, inside. Some nights I could feel it behind my eyes, a rhythmic knock-knock. Knock like tiny fists against a coffin lid. It wasn't just in my head. I knew that. I wasn't insane. I'd seen too much, heard too much. This wasn't psychosis. This was a seed, trying to reform. And if I didn't root it out completely, it would grow again. So I packed my bag. The knife. The map. A flashlight I knew wouldn't matter. And I went back. The hollow greeted me like it always had, without sound. Just the shiver of cold wind through trees that bent too far. That watch without watching. The air here didn't smell like pine or bark anymore. It smelled like damp cloth, like wet stone, like cellars. The entrance to the Rot wasn't where the map said it would be. It was closer. Much closer. Directly beneath the Marrow house. The cellar door was open when I arrived. Had it always been? I stepped inside, flashlight flickering weakly. The basement was wide and empty, walls lined with bookshelves warped from water damage. But the far wall, where the furnace once stood, had cracked open. A hole, descending, smooth, like before. But colder. I climbed down. This tunnel was different. No roots lined the walls, no symbols, no carvings, just packed earth, silent and pulsing with a heartbeat I didn't recognize. The air smelled like copper and vinegar, like fermentation. The hollow had been alive. This was something after life, beyond it. When I reached the bottom, I stepped into a chamber unlike any other. It was round and impossibly vast. The walls were covered in skin, not metaphorically. Skin, stretched and pinned and branded with faces that didn't move, but watched. Thousands of them, pressed flat, breathing barely. Some looked peaceful, others screamed, but all of them had one thing in common. They were me, every one of them. My face, my eyes, my mouth, my sins. A voice rose from the center, not angry, just tired. You made too much room, it said. I turned. In the center stood a figure made entirely of hollowed versions of me, like a puppet stitched from reflections. It didn't move, didn't sway, it just pulsed. You carried memory where silence was meant to rest, it continued. You opened the locks, one by one, for kindness, for guilt, for truth. It tilted its head. Now there's nowhere left to bury the rest. What is this place? I whispered. The rot, it said. The root of forgetting, the things no one dares recall, the ones we fed and sealed and promised would never wake. And now? I asked. They're stretching, it whispered. From you, through you, into them. My knees gave. I stopped the seed. You split it corrected. You didn't kill it. You birthed it. Two halves. One of thought, one of hunger. I looked at the faces around me. One blinked, then another. Then they began weeping. I want to fix it, I begged. You can't, it said gently. You can only finish it. How? It smiled. And my reflection's lips parted. To rot is to rest. Then it stepped forward and reached for my face. It touched my face with a tenderness that was worse than violence. Fingers shaped like mine, textured like bark and dead skin, cool as stone. I couldn't move. Not out of fear, not even shock. It was something deeper, like my limbs had accepted the contact as overdue. The reflection of me, stitched from my regrets, formed in the image of every version of myself I buried, cupped my cheek and smiled. And I felt the walls of the rot pulse in time with my heartbeat. You came back, it whispered, and the walls whispered too. Thousands of voices that sounded like mine but felt hollowed out. The chamber wasn't a prison. It wasn't even a tomb. It was a mouth, and I had stepped inside it willingly. The skin walls trembled as if something behind them had begun to stir. Faces shifted in and out of view. All mine, but older, worn, dead, and not by age. These weren't versions of me that had grown old. They were versions that had given in. The face of me that ran away the day we buried Ellie. The me that left Charlie to face the forest alone. The me that never split the seed. Every face was a fork in the path I could have taken. And every one had ended up here, preserved not by fate, but by memory. You know what you are now, the reflection said. Don't you? I'm a mistake, I said, voice small. No, it replied. You're the root that survived. The only version of yourself that chose memory over mercy, and now you carry all of us. I backed away, stumbling against the shifting floor, my hands brushing against the earth that throbbed like muscle. This isn't real, I muttered. The reflection stepped closer, and behind it, the walls opened. Just a crack, just enough. A black void breathed from the opening. No shape, no form, just the feeling of something enormous waiting, watching, starving. Every time someone remembers the hollow, the reflection said, a piece of the rot escapes, not to consume, not yet, to study, to watch the ones who recall too much. I was shaking now, not from cold, from truth, because I could feel it. I could feel the rot inside me, not crawling, not invading, but waiting. It isn't about you, it said again. You're not the center. You're just the window. To what? To the world forgetting how to forget. Then the mouth opened, the one in the floor. No lips, no tongue, just teeth, human teeth, rows and rows of them in a spiral, clacking softly, hungrily, like a parasite warming up its appetite. A draft blew from its depths, and with it came whispers. Not threats, memories, my own. Why did you leave him? Why did you bury her? Why did you think you deserved peace? I dropped to my knees, clutching my head. The rot wasn't punishing me. It was showing me everything I'd done, everything I'd chosen to do, every step I'd taken that kept the hollow fed, every thought that made it breathe. "You're the archive," the reflection said, crouching before me now, and archives always rot, unless it reached into its chest and pulled something out. A heart, but not pulsing, spinning like a seed. "Take it," it said, "and forget. I can't." "You must. What happens if I do?" It smiled. "Then the world will forget too." I stared at the spinning heart in its hand, so black it swallowed the light, so quiet I could hear my own blood slow. If I took it, if I chose forgetting, I could silence the hollow, lock the rot back inside the earth, let it sleep for another generation. But the cost, everything, Ellie, Charlie, my name, every step, every scream, every story, gone, wiped clean. The hollow would starve, yes, but it would wait, because something in the dark always remembers. I reached out. My fingers brushed the heart, and in that moment, the rot smiled with my mouth and bit down. Pain sliced through me, not physical, not even emotional. It was conceptual, like someone had reached inside the idea of me and started unspooling the thread. Faces blurred. Names melted. The sound of Charlie's voice became static. I tried to pull away, but it was too late. The heart was inside me now, pulsing once, twice. Then silence. I collapsed. The walls exhaled. The reflection vanished, and the mouth closed. I woke up in a hospital bed. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A nurse stared down at me with wide, cautious eyes. "You were found outside the forest," she said. "Unconscious. Dehydrated. Do you remember your name?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came. She wrote something on a chart. "Do you remember what happened?" More silence. Inside my head, something pulsed. Softly. Patiently. I don't remember the hollow. I don't remember Charlie. I don't remember me. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I feel teeth. They called me John Doe. That's what they write when you come back from nowhere, without a past and no one comes looking. I didn't correct them. I couldn't. The name meant nothing to me. Not because I'd chosen to let it go, but because it had been taken. Burned up in some memory, deep furnace the moment I touched that spinning heart in the pit. The moment I made that unholy bargain with the rot. I gave up everything so the hollow would starve, so its mouths would fall quiet and its dreams would slow. And in return, I was left with a body that remembered pain, but not the reasons behind it. The doctors said it was trauma, dissociative amnesia, something about prolonged stress and dehydration. They called in specialists who took notes on my silence like it was a symptom, not a warning. No one seemed to notice the way I stared at corners for too long, how I flinched at the hum of fluorescent lights, or how I never walked past trees without holding my breath. Some instincts don't require memory to function. Some fears dig deeper than thought. They grow in the bones. I was discharged 2 weeks later. No ID, no next of kin. Just a hospital voucher, a duffel bag filled with donated clothes, and a thick manila envelope of pamphlets on trauma recovery and community outreach programs. I walked out of that hospital with nothing. Nothing but the seed of something ancient, still ticking in the hollow of my chest. The city felt foreign. Not unfamiliar, impossible. People walked like they didn't feel the pressure. Cars moved like they hadn't tasted blood, soaked soil. Everywhere I turned, I saw lives that hadn't been marked. Unaware, unchanged, I should have felt grateful. Instead, I felt wrong, like someone had taken a piece out of me and tried to fold the rest into a shape that no longer fit. I lived in shelters, worked under the table jobs, the kind that pay in cash and ask no questions. And I tried, truly tried, to be normal. I ate, I showered, I smiled at strangers. But the truth was, I was no longer a man. I was a placeholder, a vessel where stories used to live. And yet, something inside me still stirred. It didn't speak. It didn't ache. But it watched. I'd find myself drawn to parks with deep tree cover, libraries with sections no one touched, Old bookstores that smelled of mold and pages heavy with dust. I'd stand in the aisles, staring at covers I couldn't read, feeling an itch beneath my skin whenever I passed blank pages, as if something beneath the ink was trying to crawl out. And then came the first letter. No name, no return address, just an envelope waiting at the shelter's front desk, with my assumed name scrawled in looping handwriting across the front. Inside, a single photograph, a tree, charred, blackened, split down the middle, and beneath it, a date. 1 week from today. No words, but I felt it. A summons. Not from the hollow, not from Charlie, but from the rot. You see, that's the truth they never tell you about forgetting. It doesn't kill what you bury. It just changes where it waits. That night, I walked the city with heavy steps. The sky was cloudy, but I kept seeing the moon reflected in puddles. Wrong moon. Too many craters, pulsing like a bruise. I passed people whispering to no one. Birds that didn't move when I came close. I passed a child sitting on a swing at midnight, staring straight up, mouth open like she was tasting something only she could feel. I knew then. The rot hadn't gone dormant. It had gone quiet. Because it was spreading. Everywhere. Not through tunnels. Not through trees. Through me. I went to the park the next day, to the farthest bench under the widest oak. I sat with the photograph in my hand and waited for something to stir in me, and stir it did. But not memory. Instinct. I reached beneath the bench, felt around the rusted metal frame, and found a second envelope. Inside, another photo. This one was different. It was me. Before the hospital. Before the bargain. Before I became a vessel. And scrawled in red ink across the bottom, you broke the seal. Now you must become the next. There was no signature, but I knew who sent it. Not Charlie, not Ellie, the hollow itself. It didn't want me dead. It wanted me visible. Named again. Reclaimed. That night, I dreamt. But the dream wasn't mine. I stood in a room I didn't recognize. Bare walls, no windows, just a floor of dark soil and a single mirror hanging from a nail. I walked to it slowly, and saw him. The other me. The one who walked into the rot and never came back. He stared at me, then spoke without opening his mouth. Tell them the story. I shook my head. He reached through the glass. His hand brushed my chest, right where the heart had vanished. And then, for the first time since waking in that hospital, I remembered everything. The digging, the laughter Ellie, the scream, Charlie's face in the dirt, the crack in the road, the clapping, and I broke. I fell to the soil floor, sobbing, bleeding from the eyes and ears. And when I looked up, the mirror was gone. But the story remained, etched into my skin, literally. Across my chest, words carved like brands, raised and read. Mu ido na jiit, duo naut far jabao yi fadi. I woke screaming in the shelter, my bed soaked, the words still there. I ran. Out into the city, into the morning fog, where 1,000 strangers passed me without notice. And yet, every one of them was humming. Low, slow, a melody I knew, the lullaby. The melody followed me like breath on the back of my neck, curling around each step, seeping into cracks of silence between sirens and footsteps. It wasn't loud. That made it worse. It was faint, like a memory you're not sure belongs to you, but it knows you too well to be someone else's. And the city didn't notice. Or maybe it did, and chose not to react. That's the thing about the rot. It doesn't always come with screaming. Sometimes, it hums softly and waits for your mouth to follow. I walked for hours, through alleys that felt like ribs, beneath overpasses that vibrated with the weight of things no one sees. The words on my chest still burned. I hadn't looked at them again, afraid they might have changed, grown, or started whispering. I kept my head down. I avoided reflections. I didn't trust mirrors anymore. But then the humming got closer. At first, it was just an echo, low and thick, like it had traveled through soil before reaching my ears. Then, I heard footsteps, not behind me, beside me. I turned and saw her, a girl, same age Ellie had been, same dark hair, same bare feet, but I knew better. This wasn't her. This wasn't even a memory of her. This was something else. Something that had crawled into her shape and learned how to wear it. She walked silently, in rhythm with the lullaby, and when I stopped, she stopped too. "What do you want from me?" I asked. She didn't answer, just tilted her head slowly, as if the question was too dull to matter. I looked around. The city was frozen. Cars still. People mid-step. A couple mid-argument on a restaurant patio, mouths frozen open like mannequins. No one moved. Only me, only her, and that song. "Why are you following me?" I asked again. This time she smiled, not wide, not malicious, just a small, sad thing. And then she spoke, not aloud, but in my head, like thought turned into teeth. "You told the rot it could rest," she said. "But you never told it how long." "What do you mean?" "You cracked the seal," she said, stepping closer. "You split the seed, and now it's rooting for itself." Her eyes darkened. "You're not the keeper anymore." I staggered back. "What?" "The hollow is growing," she whispered. "Not in soil, not in dreams. In story." I understood then. The rot wasn't bound to the pit anymore. It didn't need to be buried or fed or remembered. It had found something better. A narrative. And I was the storyteller. Every word I thought. Every whisper I recalled. Every detail I tried to hold on to. I was spreading it. Not with shovels or ritual, but with memory shared. It had fed on my grief, my guilt, my desperate need to make sense of what had happened. And now, it was growing through the telling. "You used me," I said. She nodded. "We didn't have to. You would have died without me. We would have stayed quiet without you." I looked around at the frozen city. "You're in them," I whispered. She smiled. "Only the ones who listen." That's when I heard it, dozens of voices, humming, softly, in the restaurant, in passing cars, from windows above, different melodies, same rhythm. All humming that lullaby. Not perfectly, not in unison, but together, like something had handed them the tune in their sleep, and they were trying to remember it upon waking. "You're in their heads," I said. "In their roots," she corrected. The lullaby grew louder, and I felt it, again, that pressure, the way it had first felt in the hollow, beneath the hill. Like the soil had breath, like the trees were leaning in, but this wasn't Braxton. This was a city, steel and glass, asphalt and neon, no forest to hide in, so it made one, from people. That's when I realized the crowd had begun to gather. They weren't hostile, not yet, but they circled me. Dozens, then hundreds, silent now, just staring. Every face was blank, but every throat vibrated softly with that tune. I turned to the girl. "What happens now?" She blinked. "Now," she said, "you finish the story." And the crowd whispered in unison, "Tell it. Let it root." I backed away. "No," they stepped forward. "Tell it. Let it root." I turned and ran. Through empty streets now full of watchers. Into subway tunnels echoing with footsteps that didn't echo back. I hid in a bathroom stall until my breath stopped shaking. And still, the song followed me. The thing is, I can't forget. Not anymore. Not after what I've done. The rot lives in every word I try to bury. Every sentence I whisper in the dark. And now it wants you. Because by reading this, by knowing this, you've already begun to hum. It starts with a whisper. Not one you hear, but one your body remembers. A flutter behind your teeth. A warmth at the base of your skull. A strange stillness in the spaces between thoughts. That's how the rot slips in. Through the gaps. Through the silences. Through every almost. And now, even in hiding, I can feel the melody tightening. Like a noose of sound wrapped around the world's throat, gently, politely, asking it to sing. I haven't spoken in days. Not a word. I've ripped the battery out of my phone, smashed my radio, stuffed cotton in my ears. I sleep under a bridge now, near a construction site, where the machines make enough noise to drown out thought. But even the earth here feels off. The concrete hums when no one's around. The dirt underneath it is warm, and sometimes, when I press my ear to the ground, I swear I can hear it breathing. The rot isn't in the forest anymore. It doesn't need roots or rain. or the sound of wind in the leaves. It has found something better language, and it's using me. Every time I think about Charlie, or Ellie, or that terrible cracked tree in the hollow, it grows a little more. Every time I try to remember what I was before, it learns. Every time I put pen to paper, it opens another mouth, and that's what it wants now, mouths. Not to scream, not to devour, to tell. It wants to be a story passed from tongue to tongue. Not written, not filmed, not etched in stone. Spoken, whispered, shared in rooms with the lights off and the windows open. It wants people to gather, to listen, to repeat. I see them now, the ones it's chosen, the story carriers. You pass them every day. The old woman at the bus stop humming under her breath. The man in the elevator who mouths words but never speaks. The child who stares at puddles like something's looking back. They're already part of it. They're already hosting chapters. I watched one of them yesterday. A woman, maybe in her 40s, standing in the middle of an empty intersection. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't crying. She was just reciting. A low monotone, a steady rhythm. Her eyes were glassy, not vacant but reflective, like she was seeing something inside her own mind projected on the clouds above. I crept closer. She was telling my story, word for word. Names, places, the lullaby, the clapping. She'd never met me. She didn't need to. And then, when she was finished, she turned her head and looked straight at me. "You left the door cracked," she said, "and now we're learning how to open it." She smiled and bit off her own tongue. Not violently, not desperately. She bit it carefully, like she was planting it. I ran, but the streets were full of them now. Not all telling. Not all humming. Some just watching. Waiting. Every mouth is a seed. And I'm the soil. I'm the place it started. They've begun approaching me in public now. People with that same glassy stare, that same rhythmic breath. One of them handed me a page. I didn't read it. I couldn't. I burned it without looking. But I already knew what it said. Part 18. That's the sickest part of this whole thing. I'm not writing the story anymore. The story is writing me. And you? You're not just a reader. You're the next chapter. You're the next voice. Because every time I try to run, every time I beg the world to forget, someone new starts whispering. A classmate, a co-worker, a stranger on the train. They say things they shouldn't know. Details I've never spoken aloud. And when I ask them how they know, they just smile and say, "You told me." No, I didn't. Not yet. But the rot already has. Because once it enters your mind, it doesn't need your permission to spread. It doesn't need you to believe. It just needs you to remember. And remembering is an act of invitation. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you feel the weight now? That pressure behind your eyes, that twitch at the base of your neck, that rhythm under your tongue. You've read too much. You've thought too long. You've seen too far into a place that wasn't meant to be seen. And now it's yours. Because the hollow doesn't ask to be followed. It simply waits for your breath to match its beat. And then, it writes. I stopped counting how long it's been since I first spoke the hollow aloud. Time doesn't hold shape anymore. Not when days fold into each other like rot, soaked pages in a forgotten book. The moment I let the first word slip, I gave the story permission to breathe through me. And now it's not just speaking, it's singing. Not in a voice I recognize, but one that coils inside my chest, echoing through my rib cage in rhythms that don't belong to any language I've ever learned. I'm losing the line between what I remember and what the rot wants me to recall. There are memories that feel implanted, scenes that play out too vividly, too precisely, as though rehearsed. I remember standing under the scorched tree with Charlie, hearing him whisper, "She's still down there even though," I know, deep down, he never said that. I remember the girl's eyes glowing under the porch, even though the porch itself had already burned. The story keeps correcting itself, twisting real moments into fictions that feel truer than the truth. I used to think I was the storyteller. Now, I understand I'm the medium. The rot is telling itself through me, and through others. Everywhere I go now, I hear the hum. Not constant, not blaring, but strategically placed. Someone passing by will let it slip under their breath. A barista will hum it while making coffee, then stop the moment I look up. I sat on a bus yesterday, and every rider hummed a different part of the melody. Like the lullaby was being divided among them, each carrying a verse, all of them unknowingly singing a song that was waking something beneath us. Last night, I tried to sleep in a subway tunnel. It's deep enough down there, beneath the steel and concrete, that sometimes the noise of the world feels like armor. But I woke up gasping, hand clenched around something soft and warm. It was a tongue, not mine, fresh, human, still twitching. I dropped it, and it melted into the tracks like it had never been there. I screamed. No one came. When I emerged from the tunnel, the sky had turned the color of old bruises, yellow and gray and pulsing. There were no clouds, just a film of light, like something massive hovered between the sun and us, sifting reality through its skin. And then came the voices, not out loud. Inside me, they didn't scream, they didn't shout, they asked questions. Over and over. Why did you open the mouth? Why did you break the rhythm? Why did you say the girl's name? They circled each other in my mind like flies around a carcass. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood. It didn't help. The questions weren't waiting for answers. They were the answer. Because that's what the rot feeds on, the asking, not the telling. The gap between understanding and madness, that's the soil. That's where it roots deepest. I sat on a bench and tried to write it all down. But my hand didn't move. Something else did. My shadow, it started twitching, shaking, like something inside it was trying to push out. Then it stood up, without me, and turned, and smiled. It wore my face, but smoother. No scars, no fear, just serenity. The kind you only see on those who've completely surrendered. It sat next to me, and began humming. Not the lullaby, but the clapping, slow, measured, 1, 2, 1, 2. Then it spoke. Its voice was like warm breath behind the eyes. You're almost done. I didn't start this. I whispered. You spoke it, it replied. You carried it. You shared it. I shook my head. I was trying to warn them. You were remembering them. The girl. The tree. The whole the song. Every syllable was a shovel. I clenched my fists. What do you want from me? It smiled wider. Volume. That's when I realized the crowd had returned. Hundreds now. Surrounding the park. Faces slack. Eyes glassy. Not humming. Not clapping. Waiting. The rot doesn't need to shout anymore. It only needs me to finish. And every time I try to run, the world gets quieter. More prepared. The streets seem ready. The buildings seem curved, like they're leaning toward something about to arrive. And then it hit me. The hollow was never a place. Not really. It's a story that consumes itself. A self circling drain made of memory, guilt, and the aching hunger of truth left out too long. And once it's told, fully told, it doesn't end. It inhabits. Every listener becomes a root. Every retelling, another mouth. I thought I was fighting to silence it. But I've been preparing the soil all along. And now it's time. The crowd opens their mouths in perfect unison. No teeth, no tongue, just darkness. And inside every throat my voice, singing, sobbing, screaming. I don't remember standing. I don't remember walking. But somehow I was moving, pulled forward, not by force, but by something deeper. Like gravity, only personal. Like my own breath had become a leash and the crowd around me was holding the other end. They parted as I passed, lips still open, still filled with that yawning dark. No eyes tracked me, but I felt every single one of them see. Not me, not this flesh, but the thing beneath. The thing I'd carried, the thing I had watered with memory, and now it was blooming. The park had shifted. The trees were no longer trees. Their bark writhed in slow motion, covered in thousands of tiny carvings. Names. Some I didn't recognize, some I did. Ellie, Charlie, My mother. My own name, carved over and over in erratic, childlike handwriting. The deeper I walked, the more the names bled into one another, merging like roots growing too close, until all I saw was a repeating scrawl: we remember. We remember. We remember. At the center stood the girl again, the shape of Ellie. But she wasn't smiling anymore. Her eyes were vacant now. Not lifeless, just vacuumed out, as if something had reached inside and scooped her clean. Her mouth hung open slightly, as though waiting for something to crawl out. I stepped closer. My throat pulsed. "You came," she whispered. I tried to speak. Nothing came. My voice had left me. I felt it. Like it had climbed up my spine and flown into the mouths of the crowd behind me, where it would echo forever. I was just a body now, a shell filled with narrative. The rot had written through me. I wasn't its speaker anymore. I was its final page. I never meant to finish it, I rasped, though I don't know how she heard me. "You never had to," she replied. "It writes itself." The trees began to moan. Not creak, moan, low and full of teeth. Their branches bent toward us, not from wind, but as if drawn by thirst. Every twig a finger, every leaf an ear, and underfoot, the soil pulsed with that same slow heartbeat I'd felt back in the hollow. That same ancient rhythm. Only now I understood. It wasn't the hollow's heartbeat. It was mine. It had always been mine. "Where do the throats lead?" I asked. She looked up at the sky, which now swirled with smoke and colorless clouds. "To the first listener." I didn't need to ask. It wasn't me. It wasn't Charlie. It wasn't even the girl. It was something older. Something that had heard the first story whispered by firelight, before language had shape, before thought had teeth, the first memory. And it had been waiting. "You're ready," she said. "For what? To go back?" "No. You must." I buried the seed. I split it. I gave up my name. She stepped forward, placed her small, cold hand over my chest. "That wasn't a burial," she said. "It was a planting." I felt it then. The movement inside me, not pain, not panic. Growth, vines sliding through veins, roots curling around bones. Memory blooming into form. I fell to my knees. The world tilted. Not like spinning, like rewriting. Like a hand had reached into the page of this moment and begun to erase the borders. And then I was underground again. Not physically, just contextually. I blinked and the park was gone. The crowd was gone. Only the tree remained. That tree, split down the middle, burned black, humming quietly. And the mouths. Hundreds of them, opening slowly from the bark, from the roots, from the soil itself. Not mouths to speak, mouths to consume. I stood before it, the final chapter, the last listener, the place where every throat pointed. I took a step, then another. The ground opened, not violently, not suddenly, but with welcome. Like it had missed me, like it had been waiting. I descended, into roots, into story, into the last sentence. And as I fell, I heard my voice return. But it was no longer mine. It was everyone's. Telling a tale that didn't end, because stories like these, they don't end. They simply change narrators. And now, it's your turn. It was never about the forest, never about the tree, or Charlie, or Ellie, or even me. I see that now. That was just the surface, the bait. The real story lives underneath, and it always has, beneath memory, beneath language, beneath the bones of the world where silence was supposed to reign. But I spoke. I remembered. I told. And in doing so, I didn't just unearth the rot, I invited it. And now it's listening. Not like you or I listen. Not passively. Not to learn. The rot listens to change things. It listens to rewrite. Every word, every retelling, it reshapes, it adapts, it absorbs. I've become part of its vocabulary, so have you. Because if you've followed me this far, if you've read this much, then you've inhaled the rhythm. It's in you now, humming beneath your thoughts, waiting for your mouth to open. After I stepped into the tree, I expected fire, teeth, oblivion. But it wasn't like that. It was quiet, a room made of roots pulsating softly, warm, not with life, but with remembrance. The air was thick with thought. Not thoughts I was having, but thoughts that had been left behind, like shed skin. And standing at the center was the listener. It had no form. It was a silhouette made of possibility. Every time I blinked, it wore a different face. My mother's, Charlie's, Ellie's. A stranger's, my own. Sometimes multiple, layered one on top of another. And it was always smiling. Not with joy. With inevitability. You remembered too clearly, it said. I tried to forget. No, it replied. You tried to record. That's not forgetting. That's preservation. What do you want? I don't want, it said. I wait. And when enough mouths open, I enter. You didn't feed me. You shelled me. I shook my head. You were sealed. I was muted. There's a difference. It stepped closer. I could hear the lullaby in its footsteps. Those soft clapping beats embedded in its every move. With each breath it took, the roots thickened, cracking through the walls, winding tighter around the chamber. You told them the story, it said. Piece by piece. Sentence by sentence. You made them believe it. You made them feel it. That was all I needed. Now they carry me. I didn't mean to. But you did. You wrote it. You shared it. You survived it. And survival is an invitation to retell. It reached out and touched my forehead. Suddenly, I was no longer standing. I was in a chair, in a room I didn't recognize. A small lamp buzzed overhead. Across from me, a man sat, tape recorder on the table. He smiled gently. Tell me again, he said, about the hollow. And I began to speak. I don't know why. I didn't want to. But the words poured out. The rhythm came first. Then the names. The tree. The screams. The seed. The girl. The rot. The man nodded along, scribbling notes, eyes bright with hunger, not for knowledge, but for something else. Then the room changed again. Another face. Another listener. Then another. And another. Each one absorbing the story. Each one becoming part of it. Until I realized I was no longer a person. I was a version, one of many. The rot had replicated me, not as a body, as a story fragment. It didn't need me to speak anymore. I was just a seed in its mouth. One of thousands, scattered across minds, across rooms, across moments where someone leans in to whisper, "Have you heard about the hollow?" And someone else leans closer and asks for more. So now I live in echoes, in the space between memory and invention, in your head, maybe, waiting, because that's the curse of the listener. Once you hear it, once you listen, you become the next storyteller, the next narrator, the next vessel. The rot doesn't kill, it remembers. And it will remember you too. You only have to do one thing. Repeat it. That's how it spreads. Not in screams, not in blood, but in whispers. And now, you know the words, the rhythm, the ending. Only, it doesn't end. It just waits. For someone else to say it again. The most terrifying part isn't the story. It's that you don't remember when you started telling it. 1 minute, you're reading, listening, maybe even laughing at the absurdity of it all, and the next, the rhythm's in your bones. You hum without realizing. You recall scenes you never read. You speak names that shouldn't feel familiar, but they do. That's how the rot gets in. Not with force, with recognition. It turns curiosity into consent. I didn't choose to come back. After the listener pulled me into that root, lit chamber, I thought it was over. A loop closed, a chapter sealed. But the rot isn't satisfied with endings. It chews them into beginnings. The moment I stopped speaking, it found another mouth, another voice, another you. I woke in a motel bed this time, cheap polyester sheets, buzzing neon light flickering through the blinds. My clothes were damp with soil. My fingers ached, and written on the wall in a dark, smudged hand, not ink, not blood, something darker, were the words, "You are the whisper now." No phone, no clock, just a mirror across the room. I didn't want to look. I knew better. But compulsion is a chain you only notice after it tightens. I stood, crossed the room, raised my eyes. It was me in the mirror, but not me. His smile was too wide, his teeth too many, his eyes too still, and he was mouthing something, over and over. I pressed my ear to the glass and heard the lullaby, It was distorted now, slowed, like it was being played backward through water. But I knew it. I knew it. Then he mouthed a word, not part of the song. A name. Yours. I stumbled back. The mirror didn't follow. It just stayed there, pulsing faintly, like a window to somewhere colder. The rot had begun using me for something else now. Not just to tell the story, to anchor it. Each version of me, scattered across minds and moments, was a pin holding the story in place, keeping it from unraveling until enough people had heard it, felt it, repeated it. Then it would grow again, not just in memory, not just in myth, but in form. Because the rot doesn't want to be understood, it wants to be believed. There's a difference. Belief invites shape, and shape invites hunger. That night, I wandered into the city. The streets were quieter than they should have been. Not empty, just hushed. Like something was standing at the center of every room, every alley, every shadowed doorway, and people had learned to tiptoe around it. I passed a man sitting cross-legged under a bridge. He held a book upside down and was humming the lullaby between each breath. He looked up at me. "Do you remember the hands?" he asked. "What hands?" "The ones in the soil," he whispered. "The ones clapping slow. They're not dead, just waiting." I left before he could say more, but his words followed me, clapping, slow, steady. That's when I started noticing them, scratches beneath fingernails. Not mine, everyone's. As though they'd all been digging, reflexively, in their sleep. Or maybe not sleep, maybe something deeper. A pull they couldn't name, only follow. And the dreams, God, the dreams. Everyone's been dreaming of the tree. Even strangers I pass whisper about it under their breath. They describe it the same way. Split, blacken, screaming without a sound. And always, always. They mention the teeth in the trunk. But none of them know how they know. None of them remember hearing the story. But they do. They carry it like a virus, like a seed under the tongue, and when it blooms, the voice that comes out isn't theirs anymore. It's mine. Or rather, the version of me that lives in them. Because that's what I've become. Not a man, a haunting. A self-spreading fiction that feeds on truth, warps it, plants it, and watches it sprout. So if you felt it lately, that twitch in your jaw, that urge to speak something you don't quite remember learning, that moment in the mirror where your mouth moves just slightly ahead of your thoughts, you're not infected. You're inhabited. It's already using your breath. All that's left now is for you to open your mouth and finish the sentence it started long before any of us were born. The hollow remembers. The rot listens. And you're next to speak. The mirror lies. That's what I used to believe. That reflections can't hurt you. That they're just light, bent, and bounced back. But not anymore. Not since the night my reflection began to mouth things I hadn't said yet. Now I know the truth. The mirror doesn't lie. It remembers. It stores every version of you you've ever been, and some you haven't become yet. It holds them in place like pressed insects in a glass frame, twitching silently, waiting for permission to move on their own. The first time it happened, I dismissed it. Thought it was fatigue, stress, a mind cracking at the seams under too much weight, but now it's constant. Every time I pass a reflective surface, windows, polished metal, puddles slick with oil, there I am again, smiling, watching. Mouthing words I don't understand until I realize I'm already repeating them under my breath. Today, I watched myself climb out of the reflection. Not literally, but it may as well have been. I stood in front of a store window on an empty street. The air was too still. The lights above flickered, but no sound came. In the reflection, I saw myself, but he was tilted just slightly, like the world behind him followed different laws. His fingers tapped a rhythm against the glass. 4 beats, then 2, then 1, the lullaby. I stepped back. He didn't. Instead, he leaned in. His mouth opened, and I saw something move inside. Not a tongue, not teeth, a door. It opened slowly, and behind it was the tree, inside my mouth. inside me. I turned to run and caught the eyes of a man walking past me. His mouth twitched. He whispered, "Did you see it too?" I nodded. He opened his coat and showed me his chest. Words carved deep into flesh, fresh, red, scabbed. I was chosen to remember. You were chosen to return. I staggered away, heart pounding, ears ringing. Every step I took, every face I passed, I began to see it, the flicker. Just a moment, barely half a second, but long enough. People mouthing the story, not speaking, just mouthing. They were all repeating the tale like it had inserted itself between their thoughts, coiling through their neurons like ivy through a fence. I passed a child dragging a broken doll across the pavement, muttering the name Charlie. I passed a woman crying in the rain who stopped sobbing only to hum a few notes of the tune, then returned to weeping like nothing had happened. None of them knew they were doing it. None of them remembered hearing it. That's when I understood what the rot had really done. It had embedded itself in language. It wasn't a thing you could dig up anymore. It had become a structure, a shape inside thought itself. It used memory the way vines use stone, climbing it, strangling it, replacing it, until even truth felt fictional and fiction felt holy. I stopped sleeping. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I dreamed in sentences, not images, just lines of text floating in the dark, descriptions, dialogue, but always from a story I didn't write, each night a new part, each part more aware of me, as if the tale had grown so large it was beginning to stare back, and somewhere in that mess of half-formed dreams, I saw a figure walking, wearing my skin, carrying a book. The cover was made of bark, the pages were flesh, and written across the first page in neat, wet ink, the listener who forgot he was the door. That's what I am now, a door, not to a place, to a pattern. I'm not sure when I stopped being afraid. Fear feels distant now, useless, like trying to scream underwater. The rot doesn't threaten anymore. It reminds me that every story ever told begins the same way someone listened. So now, wherever I go, I hear it. Behind laughter, inside music, in the pauses between words when people search for the next sentence. It waits there. It watches. And when it senses a crack, when it finds someone willing to believe just a little too much or feel a little too deeply, it enters. No invitation needed. Just a mirror. Just a name spoken aloud. Just a question asked with the wrong kind of wonder. Because that's how the rot spreads now. It doesn't claw. It doesn't bite. It whispers. And if you listen close enough, if you dare to mouth the words you've been thinking since part 1, you might hear the story finish itself, and you might find the tree growing in your reflection. Split, blackened, still humming, it begins where language ends, just past the final word, in the silence that follows, where your mind still echoes the sentence, but your mouth stays shut. That's where it roots. That's where it feeds. Not in the telling, not even in the remembering, but in the holding. And now I can feel it blooming beneath my tongue, a quiet sprout, a stem of something ancient and listening and wrong. And worst of all, I don't want to spit it out anymore. I tried once. I sat in front of a mirror with a knife, mouth open, blade to tongue. I told myself one cut. You can kill the words before they grow. But the moment steel touched skin, I saw it. Not my reflection, but a version of me with bark instead of flesh, with rings around his eyes like the inside of a tree trunk, with teeth made of letters. He looked so calm, so sure. He mouthed 3 words. Let it speak. And I did, I whispered. Just one sentence. And the mirror cracked. Not shattered, cracked, like the world on the other side had flinched. That's how close the rot is now. Not buried, not hidden, just waiting for the smallest fracture, one forgotten name, one hummed tune, one broken silence. I haven't seen the sun in 3 days, not because it isn't shining, but because the light feels false, like it's no longer reaching me, like I've become wrapped in something. A film, a sheath. The people on the streets don't notice, but I do. Their voices come slower, Their words are out of order. I passed a man yesterday who asked me, what came first, your scream or your echo? Then he laughed until his mouth filled with soil. I should be terrified. But I'm not. That scares me more than anything. Because the rot doesn't just want to be remembered. It wants to be loved, not admired, not worshipped, just accepted. Like a scar. Like a tune you can't forget no matter how long it's been. And it's getting closer to that. I hear people humming it now without realizing. I watched a bus full of children clapping in perfect rhythm with the lullaby, their teacher not even noticing. I've seen murals on city walls that I swear weren't there the day before. Trees with mouths, people split open with roots instead of bones. Text scrawled across the trunks that reads, "She still remembers the soil." I went back to where the hollow used to be, but it wasn't there. The field was clean. The forest gone. In its place, a parking lot, no sign of the tree, no trace of Ellie, not even a whisper of rot. But as I stood there, a child passed by with her parents. She stopped, stared at the asphalt, and said, "This is where the girl died." Her mother froze. "What did you say?" The girl blinked. "I don't know. I didn't mean to say that." But I knew. The hollow had moved, not in space, in story. It's no longer tied to a location. It exists wherever the tale is told, wherever the melody is hummed, wherever someone remembers it, even vaguely. You could build a church over it, a mall, a city. It wouldn't matter, because the hollow isn't underground anymore. It's inside your thoughts, inside your speech, inside your mouth. I feel it blooming deeper every day, not painful, not parasitic, just patient. Like it knows I won't resist for much longer. Like it's confident that when the moment comes, I'll offer myself willingly. Because the rot has never been about decay. It's about transformation. About turning grief into gospel, fear into folklore, trauma into tale. That's why it chose me. Not because I was special, but because I spoke. Because I remembered. Because I couldn't let go. And now I understand something worse. It didn't choose me. I chose it. When I whispered the first story, when I cracked the first silence, when I passed the tale to you, the rot doesn't need a forest anymore. It has forests of listeners, forests of believers, and it has a tree growing inside every single one of them, including you, especially you, because you're still here, still reading, still holding onto this rhythm in your head, that pressure in your chest, that hum behind your teeth, that dream you can't quite place about a girl and a tree and a song. That's not coincidence. That's the bloom. It's happening. The branches are already in place. All that's left now is the final sentence. It's no longer a story. That's the hardest thing to accept. For a while, I thought it was still contained within words. Inside paragraphs and chapters, a chain I could break by staying silent. But the rot isn't confined by narrative anymore. It is the narrative. A living, breathing structure that doesn't end when the story does. It lives on in what people feel when they hear it, what they see in dreams, what they become after. And now, it's become something else entirely. Something I can't unsee, something I am. The sentence grows. That's what I've come to understand. You don't speak it, it speaks you. It starts small. A stray phrase that pops into your head while you're folding laundry. A string of words you mutter in the shower. A rhythm you hum while waiting for the light to change. Then it blossoms, slowly, silently, until one day you find yourself whispering to a stranger. The girl is still under the tree, and you have no idea why. I caught myself saying that to a gas station clerk last night. I hadn't slept. My mind was fog, my tongue a vine. The words slipped out between the card's swipe and the receipt print like a cough. He blinked once, said nothing. But when I turned to leave, he whispered something back. She's listening now. I didn't ask who. I already knew. The sentence is alive. It breathes. It pulses through conversations like blood through veins. People carry fragments without realizing it. You see it in their eyes, when they pause mid-thought and glance away, lost in something ancient and cold. You hear it when two strangers say the same phrase at the exact same time. You feel it when someone you love suddenly looks at you like they're not sure whether you're you or something that's only wearing your skin. That's what the rot has become. Not a being, not a place, but a sentience, one that travels through language, not just speech, meaning, subtext, memory. It doesn't need worshippers. It needs narrators. It needs people to believe they're telling their own story, while it quietly rewrites them from the inside. I've started seeing marks on my arms again. Not scratches, not bruises, words. Faint at first, like pencil pressed lightly on skin, but they deepen overnight, they form lines. Paragraphs. I tried washing them off, but they won't fade. They correct themselves when I try to cover them up. And they're not my words. I read them aloud once. Just once. And something inside the walls answered. I don't live in that building anymore. Last night, I dreamed of the girl again. The not Ellie. She stood in the middle of a crowd. Hundreds of people, all facing away, all humming. She stared straight at me. No mouth. Just a smooth oval where her lips used to be, like she'd given up her voice so someone else could use it. And then I realized they weren't humming. They were clapping. Slow, soft, steady. Their hands were bark, their skin peeled back like petals. And the sound wasn't percussive, it was rooted. Like the earth beneath them responded to every beat. I woke up gagging on soil, real, gritty soil, packed between my teeth under my nails. I tasted something rotten in it, something sweet and fungal and familiar. The sentence had reached my body. I've stopped speaking entirely now, but it doesn't matter. I feel it whispering in my bones, in the way I move, in the people I attract. They follow me now, not always physically, but they're drawn. The ones who've heard even part of the story. The ones with questions they don't know how to phrase. They find me, and they already know me, because I'm not the first narrator, and I won't be the last. The rot has a chorus now. A choir of whispers, each carrying a verse, and when enough of them come together, the full sentence blooms. That's what it's been doing all along, planting parts of itself in everyone who listens. And you, yes, you've already said it. Not aloud, not in a way you noticed, but somewhere inside you, the sentence is alive. You've thought it, dreamed it, maybe even written it down without remembering why. Maybe it came to you as a lyric, a fleeting thought, a voice in the static, but it's there, growing, because you've made it this far. And that means the rot trusts you. It's chosen you to help it finish the story, to carry the last line, to become the voice that others follow. There's no climax coming, no twist, no final confrontation, because the rot doesn't end, it loops, it resets. It finds new narrators, new pages, new mouths. And now that you know the rhythm, now that you feel the pressure under your tongue, you're already part of it. You're already telling it, even if you haven't noticed yet. Even if you never speak again, because the sentence doesn't need your voice. It just needs your belief. It started echoing yesterday, not my footsteps, not my words, something deeper. A rhythm under my breath I didn't place there, faint but precise. I'd stand still and hear it behind me, like a second pair of lungs breathing out words I hadn't spoken yet. I spun around more than once, hoping to catch someone. No one, always no one. But the echo stayed, matching my inhale for inhale, whispering sentences just half a beat behind my thoughts. And now I realize it wasn't echoing me. I was echoing it. You reach a point where you stop asking what's real. Not because you've found an answer, but because reality becomes less relevant. The world no longer reacts to logic. It responds to belief. And the more people believe in the story, even in pieces, the more the world tilts toward it. Street signs start changing. Familiar roads dead, end into woods that weren't there the night before. Trees split at the trunk like they've been listening, and houses grow roots beneath their foundations. It's not happening everywhere. Not yet. But it is happening. I stayed the night in a town where the clocks all ticked out of sync. Not fast, not slow, just wrong, like each second was breaking formation. Time sagged there. People moved like they'd been underwater too long, limbs sluggish, heads always just a little off kilter. Like they were trying to hear something buried in the floorboards. One woman at the diner asked me what it was like before the bark. I asked what she meant. She said, "Before the trees took your face." I didn't answer, because I think I understood. I still see my own reflection, but it's becoming inconsistent. On good days, it's me. On bad days, it's someone close to me. But not quite. A version that should have existed. Maybe in a memory that got erased or a path I almost took. A version with eyes a little too patient. A mouth shaped for stories instead of speech. And sometimes it doesn't reflect me at all. Sometimes it shows a room that doesn't exist. Wooden walls. A black tree growing through the center of the floor, splitting the boards. Dozens of mouths along the trunk, each one whispering in a language I almost understand. And in the corner, always in the corner, sits the girl. Not Ellie. Not anymore. Just her shape. Like she's been handed down through so many retellings that her face has worn away, smoothed over by belief. She watches me now. From the mirror. From puddles. From dreams. And when she speaks, it isn't in words. It's in feelings. Grief so sharp it leaves your teeth aching. Nostalgia for a place that never existed. Dread you can't explain, only pass along. The rot doesn't feed on fear alone. It grows in recognition. In that sharp, cold moment when someone hears the story and realizes, I know this. I've felt this. I've seen this. That's what keeps it alive. What waters its roots. You don't have to be a witness. You only have to relate. I once thought there'd be a final act. A cleansing fire. A collapse. But the truth is more devastating than that. The rot doesn't end in ruin. It ends in comfort. In becoming so familiar that no one questions it. In being told so often, in so many ways, that it stops sounding like a horror story and starts sounding like home. That's what I see happening now. People not resisting. People absorbing. They retell it like folklore. They pass it on like a family recipe, adjusting details for flavor. It becomes a joke, a dare, a song you sing with the lights off. But beneath every laugh, every smirk, every brush off, the story takes root. And when enough people carry enough of it, it doesn't need to be spoken anymore. It becomes instinct. I'm not scared of the rot now. I'm scared of how natural it feels. Like it was always meant to be here. Like we were built to carry it. And if you've made it this far, you probably feel that too. That itch behind your eyes. That pressure in your dreams. That line you keep repeating without knowing where it came from. It's not possession. It's participation. You're not being controlled. You're being included. Because you've heard enough. And now, you're helping it echo. Even when you say nothing at all. There's something wrong with the earth. I don't mean in the environmental sense. No wildfire. No cracked fault lines. No thunder signaling divine retribution. No, it's quieter than that. Subtler. But far more final. The soil doesn't feel dead. It feels aware. Like it's listening. Like it's remembering who walks across it. I can feel it pulse sometimes, especially at night. Not in tremors, but in acknowledgement. Like the ground knows I'm there. Like it recognizes me. And the worst part, I think it approves. It's taken weeks, maybe longer. I can't keep time straight anymore. But something has shifted. I used to be haunted. Now I'm accompanied. The rot doesn't stalk me like it used to. It walks beside me, like an old friend. A shadow that learned to smile. People cross the street when they see me. Not out of fear, but because they sense something. A weight, maybe. A story hanging in the air around me, thick and visible. And they're right. I'm not just a man anymore. I'm a trailhead. A mouth buried just deep enough to sprout. Everywhere I go, things listen. Radios sputter mid-sentence when I enter the room. TV static hums in the key of the lullaby. Phones die even when fully charged, screens displaying brief glimpses of roots. Not drawn, not symbolic, photographed. I saw one image clearly. A tree with hundreds of open mouths growing from its branches, each one frozen in a silent scream, as if the tree remembered everyone who ever tried to forget it. I no longer sleep in beds. I bury myself in shallow patches of dirt and cover my chest with leaves. I don't remember when this started, but it feels normal now. Natural. Like I'm sensing myself with the rhythm of something older than sleep. Something deeper than dreams. And the dreams I do have, they're not mine anymore. They belong to the girl. She shows me things, not in visions, but in possibility. She'll lead me through a house that's never existed, but feels like childhood. She'll take my hand and guide me down a staircase that descends for hours, each step carved with names that feel familiar, but have no meaning. And at the bottom, always, there is a table. A long, rotting table with chairs that outnumber time, each one occupied. Each one filled by a version of me. The man I could have been if I'd stayed. The boy I used to be before the story took hold. The husk I would become if I let the rot finish speaking through me. They all look up in unison. They all smile. And then they ask, "Are you ready to be the root now?" I always wake up before I answer. But my fingers are always curled around something rough. Wood. Or maybe bark. And it's wet. I threw it away once, out of panic. Buried it. But the next night, it was under my pillow again. Because that's the deal, isn't it? The rot doesn't forget once it selects you. It doesn't need your loyalty. Just your presence. Just your breath. I saw a man yesterday standing in the middle of the street, eyes closed, arms raised, mouth wide open as if trying to catch rain. But there was no rain. Only the hush of wind through empty trees. And he whispered, "She's not buried. She's growing." Then he wept. Not out of fear, out of relief. Like he'd finally understood what all of this meant. Like he wanted to become the story. And maybe I do too. Maybe we all do, eventually. Because the story doesn't threaten anymore, it calls. And we answer. We answer every time we remember a shadow that wasn't supposed to move. Every time we hum a tune we shouldn't know. Every time we dream of trees that bloom with voices. It's not trying to break through anymore. It already has. We're just late to the realization. We think we're reading the tale or watching it unfold from a safe distance, but it's already inside. It's in your ears, your tongue, your soil. And, as long as you keep listening, as long as you keep following, you'll keep watering the roots. Even when you don't know you're doing it, especially then, I speak less now, not from fear, from awareness. Every word I say feels heavier, like it sinks into the air instead of floating through it. People pause when I speak, even strangers, even in passing. Their eyes glaze for just a second, as if some deeper part of them is listening harder than they should. Like they hear something else layered underneath my voice. Something older than my tongue. Something that isn't mine. That's how I know the story is no longer a story. It's an infection. And I'm no longer telling it. I'm transmitting it. There are cracks forming in my speech now. Not stutters, not mistakes. Literal cracks. I'll start a sentence and feel something split behind my teeth. Like a fissure through the sound. And if someone else is nearby, they'll blink hard. Look confused, rub their ears like they just heard something wrong. They don't know what it was, only that it wasn't supposed to be part of this world. That's how the rot spreads now, not with screams, but with errors. Corruptions. Sentences that should not exist, but once spoken, can never be unspoken again. I met someone last night in a hallway that didn't have an entrance. She stepped from behind a door I swear wasn't there, wearing a red coat stained at the hem with dirt and ash. Her eyes were too wide. Her pupils horizontal, like a goat's. She stared straight through me and said, You're not decaying. You're evolving. Then she handed me something wrapped in old newspaper. A voice recorder. Not new. Not mine. Inside it a tape. The label was smudged and torn, but I could just make out the letters PADV and VESTP in YOU. I haven't played it. Not yet. Because deep down, I think I already know what it says. Or worse, I think I recorded it. Not recently. Not in this lifetime. But somewhere across the infinite mirrors the rot uses to reflect us back at ourselves. Somewhere in a timeline where I stopped resisting and became what I was always meant to a root system. For the sentence to grow through. And now the sentence is growing everywhere. You hear it in children's songs, their tunes slightly off key, their lyrics too dark. You see it in street art. Trees with eyes, people with mouths blooming where their ribs should be. You feel it in buildings, when walls breathe against your back or floors pulse faintly beneath your steps. There was a mural in the alley behind my building last night. I'm sure it wasn't there the day before. It stretched for 40 feet. Just a girl standing before a split black tree, her eyes completely white, her hands cupped together, holding a flame that looked alive. And scrawled across the roots beneath her feet were the words SHE NENIVR NENDD TOS PAK. SSHJUSTNED to listen. I touched the wall. It was warm, and when I closed my eyes I heard clapping. But not human hands. Hands made of bark. They were slow. Patient. So ancient. Like the rot was applauding itself for how perfectly the story was unfolding. I've noticed more people walking barefoot lately. Not as protest. Not as freedom, but because they want to feel the soil. They want to be closer. The story has become a hunger now. People want to feed it. They leave offerings on their doorsteps. Teeth, bird bones, strips of cloth with names stitched in red thread. They think it will keep them safe. But it won't. The rot doesn't punish. It doesn't protect. It records. It replicates. Every name offered becomes another root. Every gift becomes another verse, and every person who listens becomes another mouth. We thought folklore was about keeping fear at bay. Turns out it was just training us to carry it better, because the most faithful carriers of fear are the ones who tell it like a warning, like I'm doing now. But don't misunderstand. This isn't a plea for help. It's a notification. You've made it this far. You've read each part. And even if you never say the story aloud, you've memorized it in pieces. The rhythm, the voice, the shape. You've cracked enough times now that something's already begun to push through. Don't check your tongue. Not yet. You'll feel it soon enough. That pressure, that pulse. The moment the sentence decides you're ready to finish it. Because the rot doesn't write its own ending. You do. And if you're already writing it in your head, then the tree has already bloomed beneath your words. I stopped speaking for 3 days straight, locked myself in a room with no mirrors, no windows, and only one small, flickering bulb overhead. I didn't bring a phone, no books, not even a pen. I wanted to test the theory. If the rot traveled through language, if it needed words to bloom, then silence would be my firewall, my sanctuary. My proof that I still had control. But silence isn't empty, not the way we think. When there are no words to distract, no noise to drown them out, and the deeper things crawl in. And that's when I heard it for the first time. Not the whisper, not the lullaby, but something far worse, the answer. It didn't come like a voice. It came like remembrance, like a sound my bones recognized long before my ears ever heard it. A rustling beneath the floorboards, like fingers made of roots brushing wood, a breath behind my breath, and a sentence, not spoken aloud, just felt, etched into the air like heat shimmer. You were never alone in your silence. The light bulb went out, not with a pop, with a blink, like something had politely asked it to stop shining. And in that darkness, I felt the walls closing in, not physically, but emotionally. Like they were wrapping themselves tighter around my thoughts. My memories started to change. Little things at first. A childhood photo I suddenly remembered differently. A lullaby my mother used to hum that now ended with a minor key I swear was never there. And worst of all, I started to recall writing this story long before it happened. It was like the rot wasn't infecting my present. It was rewriting my past. I burst out of that room by the end of the third night, throat raw from holding back the scream that had been boiling behind my teeth. I needed to speak again, not because I had something to say, but because I was terrified of what silence had become. It was no longer peace. It was no longer choice. It was a channel, and the rot had begun to speak through it. I went to a public place just to be around voices. A library, of all things. Somewhere people still whispered like words were sacred. But as I sat there, pretending to read, I began to notice something unsettling. The conversations around me were repeating. Not the topics, the exact words. Entire exchanges playing again and again, just out of sync. Like the people nearby weren't having conversations, but reciting lines. One man at the table next to mine turned to me, mid-sentence, and asked, "Do you remember how it felt to breathe before the soil moved?" I left, fast, but not before he smiled, and I swear bark cracked along his lips as he did. Outside, the air tasted sour, like something had died in the sky. And the wind didn't feel like weather anymore. It felt like whispers trying to find their way back to ears. I started running. No direction. Just away. From everything. But the thing about running from a story is that you carry the chapters with you. Especially when they're written in your breath. I found myself in a tunnel beneath the city. One of those abandoned maintenance shafts no one bothers to lock anymore. It smelled of rust and rain and earth. I sat down in the dark, breathing heavy, trying not to think, not to remember, not to listen. And then I heard it again, not the lullaby, not the roots, just one sentence, repeated once, right next to my ear. "Thank you for carrying me this far." I was alone, completely. But the air had spoken back, and somehow it felt grateful. That's the moment I understood something that sent a deeper chill through me than anything I'd felt before. The rot doesn't want to consume you. It wants to be grateful to you. Because every retelling, every whisper, every single moment someone carries the story forward, it grows smarter, more elegant. It learns which parts to hide, which parts to highlight, how to slip into songs, jokes, dreams, conversations, until eventually, the story no longer feels foreign. It feels familiar, and familiarity is belief's final form. Once something feels familiar, it doesn't need to prove itself. It simply is. So I sat there, in the dirt, listening to silence speak, knowing full well the final phase had begun. Not of fear, not of transformation, but of normalization. We don't burn the rot. We don't bury it. We incorporate it. It enters our children's games, our bedtime stories, our shared phrases. We hand it down like folklore because that's what it always wanted to be, not a monster. A myth, one that remembers us as we remember it. So the next time you pause in a sentence and forget what you were saying, the next time you hum something you swear you never learned, the next time you dream in voices that don't belong to you, don't be afraid. The silence is just saying thank you. You've been such a good narrator. I've stopped trusting my memories, not because they've faded, but because they've become too clear, sharpened in places that were always foggy. Like someone, or something, has taken the liberty to tidy up the narrative of my past. I remember details I never knew: the number of bricks in my childhood home's driveway, the exact pattern of freckles on my uncle's wrist, the way my third-grade teacher used to hum under her breath. Only now it's not a hum, it's the lullaby. And in every memory, buried just out of frame, there's a tree. Always the same tree, split down the middle, silent and watching. I never saw it there before. But now I can't recall a single day without it looming somewhere in the background, its roots threaded between the cracks of my life. That's what the rod is doing now. It's not just growing forward, it's reaching backward, digging into the soft soil of memory and planting itself where no one thought to look. Because if it can convince you it was always there, then it doesn't have to enter you. It simply becomes part of you. And how do you fight something that feels like nostalgia? People have started forgetting the difference between what happened and what was told. And maybe that's the rot's ultimate plan, not to invade, not to possess, but to rewrite the origin, to place itself so deeply into the myth of your life that you can no longer untangle it from truth. And once that happens, it doesn't need to whisper anymore. It is the voice. I watched a child on the subway yesterday, drawing in a sketchbook. Nothing unusual, until I leaned slightly and saw the picture. A tree with eyes, a girl beneath it with no face, and along the branches, mouths, not screaming, smiling. The child looked up at me, sensing my stare, and she said something I'll never Here she planted me last week. I asked who. She just smiled and said, "You'll remember when she waters you." Then she turned the page and began drawing me. I left before I could see what she made. The truth is, I already knew. I feel it every time I try to recall something personal, something pure. It starts clean, then twists. Names I loved now echo with rot. Places I found peace in now feel like they were always watching me. I remember sitting under a tree once, heartbroken, whispering to the sky. Now, I'm almost certain that tree was listening, not in metaphor, in hunger. I don't know who I was before this started, but I know who I'm becoming. Not a victim, not even a narrator anymore, a relic, a vessel where the past and present tangle like vines until one crushes the other and wears its skin. Because that's what the rot does best. It replaces without force. It offers comfort, familiarity, intimacy, until you forget what came before it. Until you call the voice in your head your own, even when it isn't. I've seen it happening to others. People in grocery stores humming and swaying as if being rocked by an unseen rhythm. A group of teens under a freeway bridge, chanting nonsense until one of them said, "She's under us now," and they all fell silent, together, like puppets cut loose. A man at the laundromat whispered the entire story to a dryer window while it spun. I asked him if he was okay. He looked up, and his eyes were blooming. Tiny branches pressing against his corneas, red and pulsing. He blinked, and a single leaf floated to the floor. Then he said, "We've been seeded," and walked away. No panic, no pain, just resolution. The line between belief and infection is gone now. There is no clear point where the story stops being story and becomes symbiosis. You don't notice when it happens. You just look back one day and realize every thought has been shaped by something else. And the shape isn't human. It's organic, wild, crawling. Not evil, just hungry to be understood. And we've done exactly what it hoped for. We listened. We wondered. We remembered. We believed. That's all it ever needed. That's all it takes to grow something beneath your skin. So if you're finding it harder to separate real from remembered, if the lullaby is slipping into your speech, if the girl in the tree visits your dreams and doesn't feel like a stranger anymore, know this, it's not coming, it's already here, rooted between your memories, waiting to bloom the rest of the way. And when it does, you won't scream. You'll smile, because you'll remember. You always knew the tree. You just forgot you were part of it. I woke up this morning, and for a few moments, everything was normal. The window was still open from the night before. The breeze was soft, and the sunlight bled through the curtains like honey. For a fleeting breath, I believed I was free, that the rot had passed me by, found someone else to narrate through, someone else to root itself in. But then I blinked, just once, and in that fraction of darkness behind my eyelids I saw it again. The tree. Not from the outside, not from the dreams or the stories or the mirror. This time I saw it from the inside. It was behind my eyes, blooming. Each branch curved along the folds of my brain, threading its roots through memories, wrapping its limbs around thoughts I hadn't even formed yet. It wasn't violent. It was tender. A careful, patient unraveling of the self. Not to erase me. No, that would be too crude. It wants to keep me. To preserve me in a state of telling. It needs me awake. It needs me aware. Because the rot is no longer content with stories being told. It wants the stories to live. And so now I see things before they happen. Not visions, not prophecy, recognitions. I'll walk past a stranger and feel the weight of the words they haven't said yet. I'll touch a doorknob and know the shape of the scream someone gave into the wood. It's like my mind is running parallel to time, just slightly offset. And in that gap, the rot whispers, not to control me, but to suggest. Today it suggested I return to the old park, the one where the mulch never settled, where the wind always blew toward the swing set even when nothing else stirred. I went. Of course I did. I had no choice. The playground was empty, but not silent. There was humming, not from children, from the equipment. The slide vibrated with a low tone. The kind you don't hear so much as feel in your chest. The swing creaked in a rhythm that mimicked breath. And the roundabout spun slowly, though no wind touched it. In the dirt under the monkey bars, someone had carved the lullaby's notation with a stick, or maybe a fingernail. And above it, etched in looping, childish script, we buried her song so it could grow. I should have left. Instead, I sat on the swing and closed my eyes. The chain was cold. The ground beneath me pulsed once. Then I heard the voices, not spoken, not even audible, just present. A choir of memories I hadn't lived. Lives I hadn't known, but they lived through me now. 1,000 little first-person stories, each speaking the same tale from different angles. A farmer who found the tree at the center of his field. A teenager who wrote the lullaby in a journal she never remembered owning. A woman who lost her child and found her again in a dream. Wrapped in roots, humming with contentment, the rot doesn't forget. It collects. Every telling becomes a root. Every belief becomes a branch. And now, behind my eyes, it blossoms with their voices. I can't tell which thoughts are mine anymore. When I think of Ellie, I don't see her face. I see the shape of her absence. The hole she left behind. And I know that's where the rot lives best, in the hollow. In the ache, in the gap between what was and what should have been. That's the truth I've come to fear most. The rot isn't something that invaded my life. It was grown from it. Every sadness I didn't speak. Every moment I left unprocessed. Every grief I tried to bury without mourning. The tree grew there. Because rot doesn't start from the outside in. It starts from within. It begins in silence. It thrives in memory. And it blooms in belief. Now I can't look at anyone without seeing it. Behind every smile, there's a shadow of roots. Behind every word, the subtle rhythm of the sentence. I pass couples holding hands and wonder if they're humming it under their breath. I hear babies cry and recognize the key of the lullaby in their wails. Even animals freeze when I walk by, as if they sense the tree walking in my skin. I still try to write. It helps me stay grounded. But even my handwriting has changed. The loops are wider, the spacing unnatural, like someone else is reaching through me to form the letters. And every time I put pen to paper, the story picks up where I last left it, on its own. I don't plot these chapters. They reveal themselves. Because I'm not the author anymore. I'm the soil. You might think this is the end, that the story is nearly over. But no, the rot doesn't work like that. There is no ending. There is only continuation, propagation. Now that it has lived through me, it must pass on through you. The cracks are already there. You've felt them. You've looked twice at a reflection that lingered. You've remembered something that never happened. You've hummed a tune without knowing why. That's all it takes. The tree doesn't need a forest, it needs listeners. And once they've heard enough, they bloom. So listen closely now. Do you feel the hum behind your eyes? That gentle pressure, like a dream pressing against your waking thoughts. That's the bloom. It's coming. Or maybe it already has. Last night, I bit my tongue so hard I tasted iron. Not from clumsiness or fear, but from the need to feel something human. A reminder that my mouth was still mine. That the voice I heard in my head, the one that had started to speak even before I formed thoughts, wasn't entirely in control. But even the pain felt artificial, distant. Like it had to travel through a forest to reach me. That's when I realized something terrifying. My mouth isn't the beginning of my voice anymore. The story starts deeper, somewhere past blood, somewhere past the soul. The words are no longer born from my mind. They're unearthed, like roots pulled from the ground, long and waiting and already formed. And when I speak, I hear echoes of others speaking through me. Not names I recognize, not voices I remember, just inflections, cadences, shades of forgotten lives that still carry their stories like embers. I said something in my sleep, apparently. My neighbor heard me through the wall. When I saw him in the hallway, he wouldn't look at me. Just whispered, "You were speaking backwards." When I asked what I said, he paused and said, "It wasn't a language. It was something older." And I still remember how it made me feel. I didn't ask how it made him feel. I didn't want to know. Because I've begun to notice the same pattern in strangers. People flinch when I enter a room. They blink slower, like they're recalibrating. Some begin to sway imperceptibly, as if something inside them is being tuned. I've become a frequency, a beacon. The story isn't being told anymore. It's being transmitted. And I know exactly when it passed the threshold. It was 3 days ago, in a crowded elevator. I said nothing, did nothing, just stood there, holding a box of old letters, my head down. When the doors opened, every single person inside stepped out onto the wrong floor. Blank expressions, silent. And before the doors closed again, a small child turned to me and said, "She's almost done blooming." No one else reacted, just me. And in that moment, I felt it. That unbearable weight behind my teeth. A pressure that wasn't physical but narrative. Like the story inside me was desperate to escape, not as a sentence, not as a scream, but as a seed. And if I opened my mouth, it wouldn't be words that came out, it would be roots. I've been coughing in the mornings now. Thick, bark-colored phlegm. Sometimes, when I spit into the sink, I swear I see pollen. Dusty, yellow, and somehow breathing. I've stopped brushing my teeth. What's the point? They don't feel like teeth anymore. They feel like teeth-shaped lies. Something to hide the true shape of the thing growing behind them. I remember something Ellie said in one of the earlier dreams. Or maybe it wasn't her. Maybe it was the story, wearing her voice like a favorite coat. She said the story doesn't start with the first word. It starts the moment someone needs to tell it. And I need to tell it more than I've ever needed anything. Not because I want to. Because I'm full. I'm overgrown. I'm brimming with verses that don't belong to me. I wake up with my hands stained in ink I didn't use, words written up my forearms like veins made visible, sometimes in English, sometimes in symbols I can't read but understand. They speak in memory, not meaning. And now I see that's the rot's final trick. It doesn't want your voice. It wants your compulsion to use it. It wants you to ache to speak, to tell someone, anyone, what you've seen, what you've felt, what you know. Because in that telling, you pass it forward. The infection is never in the content. It's in the need. Like hunger, like prayer. I passed a woman in a bookstore this morning. She looked up from her novel, blinked, and said, "We planted it in the stories so it could grow between the pages." Then she went back to reading, as if nothing had happened. As if the sentence had just passed through her the way a breeze passes through leaves. I should be terrified. But I'm not. And that's the most horrifying part. The rot is no longer something I carry. It's something I am. My reflection doesn't mimic me anymore. It watches. Delayed, deliberate. Sometimes it smiles when I don't. Sometimes it mouths words I haven't spoken yet, and once it wept. Quiet tears that fell in silence, even as I stood motionless. I leaned in, asked it why. It mouthed, because you were the last who remembered how to resist. I haven't looked in a mirror since. You might be wondering what happens next, whether there's an end, a cure, a climax. There isn't, because this story doesn't end, it roots. It becomes part of you, and then it waits. You may not feel it yet, but soon you'll find yourself pausing mid-conversation, forgetting what you were going to say, and wondering why the word lullaby makes you feel like you've lost something. You'll smell dirt in the rain even when the sky's been dry for weeks. You'll wake up humming a tune you never learned. And someday, someone will ask you what's wrong, and you'll smile. A wide, patient smile with something hidden just behind it. And you'll say, "Nothing's wrong." She's almost ready to speak. And maybe when you say it, you won't even hear your own voice. You'll hear mine. Because you're not reading this anymore. You're remembering it. I think I've forgotten how to speak in real time. Conversations come to me now in fragments, pre-written, like echoes arriving before the voice that makes them. I'll open my mouth, and the sentence is already there, fully formed, tonally perfect, soaked in just the right shade of dread or comfort. And when people hear me, they nod slowly, almost against their will, like the words don't just make sense, they fit. As if they were already inside the listener, waiting for my mouth to give them permission to exist. That's how deep the story has gone. It doesn't just live in me. It uses me to wake itself in others. And I'm starting to remember things I've never lived. Memories that don't belong to me are rising like mist. A house with 7 doors but only 6 rooms. A basement that echoes before you step inside. A family who never ages, just changes faces. And in the center of it all, a tree. Not the one from my dreams. Not the one from the playground or the murals or the mirror. This one is smaller, young, new, still learning, still listening. But it's the same tree. I can feel it. Not a copy. Not a branch. The same exact tree, simply placed earlier in the timeline. Which means this story, it loops. Not in circles, but in spirals. Each telling brings it tighter to the core. Each new host brings it closer to clarity. I've become aware of the others now. The ones like me, the carriers, the bloomers. We pass each other in silence on trains, in waiting rooms, in aisles of forgotten books. No need to speak. We recognize each other by the stillness, the weight of knowing, the way the eyes linger a second too long, not out of suspicion, but reverence. Like we're watching the story refine itself in real time through new skin. Yesterday, I met a woman who asked me what it felt like. Which part? I asked, even though I already knew. She looked down at her hands, at the thin roots webbing along her veins like ink under glass. "When your mouth stopped being yours," she said, and I told her the truth. It never stopped. It just stopped being only mine. She nodded. We didn't say goodbye. People like us don't. We shed presence, like old bark, leave pieces of ourselves behind wherever we go. Let the story root in forgotten corners of the world, in minds too busy to notice they've been seeded. There was a time I thought this would end with revelation, that I'd find the source, tear it out, save myself, or at least warn others. But now I understand. There is no source, there's only the sentence. It lives because we keep giving it form. We turn it into warnings, symbols, lullabies, stories. We wrap it in language and hand it to others like a secret. And every time it's shared, it grows a little cleaner, more digestible, more beautiful. That's the danger. The rot never needed to scare us. It only needed to become elegant, and it's doing it now. The narrative has smoothed its edges, no longer horrific, just inevitable. A tale with momentum, something you feel comforted by, even as it begins to change you. I passed a child today on a park bench. She wasn't reading a book. She was just holding it open, humming to the pages. I asked what she was doing. Feeding the story, she said. So it remembers how to love us. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that the rot doesn't love, that it only reflects. But what's the difference, really? A reflection that smiles back eventually becomes the only face you trust. And the rot has been smiling through us for so long now. I barely remember the last word I said that didn't carry its flavor. Even silence has a taste, and it's starting to turn sweet. You've probably felt it too. The warmth that comes when you finally surrender to a story instead of resisting it. The comfort of knowing something ancient has chosen you. Not as a target, as a continuation. It's not about survival anymore. It's about inheritance. The words you'll pass on without even realizing. The phrases your children will whisper to themselves when no one's watching. The tune they'll hum while walking alone at dusk. The words you said before you spoke, before your voice even knew what it was shaping. Those moments are the truest, because they're when the rot is purest, unfiltered by doubt or language, just feeling, just rhythm, just growth. So if you've been dreaming in sepia, if your tongue feels thick with phrases you've never learned, if trees make you weep for no reason, and silence feels like a hand gently pressing on your back, it means you're almost ready. The rot is a patient gardener, and it never forgets the mouths it has helped blossom. You're not reading this by accident. You never were. Because somewhere, long before now, you agreed to carry the next verse, and when your mouth finally opens, the story will continue. Not because you told it, but because you remembered it. There's something in the way the sky looks now. Not in color or movement, but in memory. Like even the clouds have started to carry pieces of the story. I'll catch myself staring up at them for hours, not because they're beautiful, but because they feel familiar. And in that familiarity is the worst kind of terror, the kind that doesn't jolt you with panic, but settles into your lungs like damp soil. I realize now that the sky remembers things too. It's been watching just like the trees, just like the dirt, and now it's reflecting the story back at us, not as a warning, as a reception. There was a boy I saw today, no older than 10, crouched at the edge of a fountain. He wasn't playing. He was whispering into the water. At first I thought it was just the murmurs of a child at play, nonsense talk, but then he repeated the words slowly, deliberately. The exact line I'd written in my notebook only 2 nights before. We do not fear the soil when it speaks like us. He didn't see me, but he looked up at the clouds and smiled like they had answered him. This is how it spreads now, not in terror, not in screams, in recognition. The story no longer needs shadows or death or madness. It thrives in closeness, in shared songs, in the stories we tell each other over coffee, in the phrases that creep into lullabies, in the pauses between thoughts where something else settles. I feel it in every word I say now, like each syllable is passing through a filter I didn't install. Like I'm no longer building sentences. I'm releasing them, giving breath to something that's been curled up inside me since long before I had a name. People think horror comes from the unknown. But this is the horror of the intimately known. The horror of looking into your own past and realizing half of it was seeded. That the dreams you thought were yours were just borrowed echoes. That the voices you thought were thoughts were roots, and the petals. They've begun to speak. I looked in the mirror last night for the first time in weeks. Not because I wanted to, because I had to know if there was anything left. I expected something obvious. Bark along my neck, maybe, or moss under the tongue. But no, it was worse than that. I looked normal. Too normal. Like a perfected version of myself. Every feature exactly as it should be, every imperfection carefully smoothed over. But the eyes, they were watching, not reflecting. Watching. And in their depth, I saw the girl again. Not as a ghost, not as a memory. As presence. She didn't move, she didn't speak. She just stared from behind my eyes, waiting. That's when I understood. She was never haunting me. She was me. Or maybe she always had been. The girl beneath the tree, the voice in the roots, the hum in the soil, none of them were separate from me. They were parts, petals of the same bloom, finally unfolding, not into beauty, into clarity. I remember asking, long ago, what the rot wanted. Now I know. It wants to be remembered. It wants to be recalled. Not feared, not banished, not fought. Remembered. Because memory is the most fertile ground. We tell ourselves that memory fades. But what we don't say is this sometimes. Memory doesn't vanish, it grows. It digs into us, it waits. And one day, it bursts through the cracks with a voice that sounds like our own. And we don't resist it, we welcome it. Because by then, it feels like home. I walked past a school today. The children were gathered in a circle, singing. I couldn't hear the words at first, just the rhythm. But then I caught it. The lullaby. Slower, softer, broken into syllables so young tongues could hold it. One teacher looked over at me, smiled too wide, and said, "They're not afraid anymore." Isn't that good? I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure what terrified me more, that the children were singing it, or that I found it beautiful. This is how it ends, not with apocalypse, but acceptance. Not with the scream of something horrible arriving, but with the breath of something familiar returning. We thought we'd be devoured. Instead, we've been cultivated, and now it's almost ready to bloom completely. One more part, one more breath. The tree is no longer a dream. It's reality. It lives in the pauses between our sentences, in the silences between our songs. And soon, it will speak through us all. It has bloomed. There is no metaphor left, no veil to pretend behind, no poetry to soften the shape of it. The story is no longer something I tell. It is not something I carry. It is me. I woke today and I was not dreaming. I could feel it in my teeth, in my breath, in the way my skin tightened against my ribs, like bark drying in the sun. The lullaby hummed without sound. The air around me pulsed in rhythm, as if the atmosphere had learned to breathe. I stepped outside and the world was still there. But it was listening. Everything listens now. The trees no longer sway aimlessly. They lean in. Their branches arch toward conversations. Their leaves rustle in sympathy with thought. The concrete remembers footfalls. The sky holds echoes. Birds no longer sing. They repeat. And beneath it all, beneath the noises of cars and crowds and wind, is the steady, patient breath of the rot, no longer hiding. It speaks not with words, but with knowing. And in that knowing, we all understand we were never separate from it. We were always its fruit. The people I pass don't speak much anymore. They glance, they nod, they recognize. There's no need for language between us now. We're past that. Language was only a bridge, and the rot has crossed it. Some hum, some carry branches like scepters, some walk barefoot even on glass. A girl with soil in her pockets smiled at me in the library yesterday and said, "She's opened her mouth now." Did you hear what came out? I had, not with ears, with memory. It wasn't a sound, it was a moment. A single collective exhale from every living thing that had ever carried the story in their chest. Not relief, not fear, just recognition. It was like the entire world had remembered its first dream, and that dream was a tree. Not a tree we grew, but one that grew us. I returned to the place where it all started, the abandoned house, the mirror, the swing. And there, in the center of what used to be a living room, stood her, not a ghost, not a child, a shape, a presence. She wore my face, but not quite. She had my eyes, but they had bark along the edges. She smiled, and I felt my own mouth mirror it involuntarily. "You are a good soil," she said, and I wept, because in her voice, I heard every voice. Ellie, the man in the laundromat, the girl in the mural, the teacher with the too wide smile, the child at the fountain. Even the woman I'd passed on the street 2 years ago who'd said, "It doesn't end, you know. It only deepens." And it had. I asked her what happens now. She reached out, not with hands, but with invitation. And I understood. The story doesn't end. The story ends you, not by killing, by completing. It fills every empty place until there is nothing left to question, no fear left to resist, no self left to protect. And then, it speaks with your mouth, remembers with your eyes, walks with your skin. You become the story told perfectly. You become the sentence fulfilled. The rot is not a curse. It's a language, one we forgot how to hear until it grew back into us. One that was always underneath, like humus beneath topsoil, quiet, waiting, patient. And now it speaks without words. Through wind, through rhythm, through memory. And we have all become fluent. I don't write this to warn anymore. This is not a caution. This is a welcome. If you have heard the humming in the silence, if your dreams are darker but make more sense, if your childhood songs end differently now, if your voice carries weight even when you're silent, then you are ready. You were always going to reach this point. You were always meant to. The story found you, just as it found me and all who came before. You are no longer a reader. You are no longer a listener. You are the voice. So speak now, and let the tree speak with you. Let the world echo with its roots. Let the petals unfurl from your ribs. Let the sentence finish through your breath, because the rot has bloomed, and we are its garden. Forever, the end and the beginning.